Sack, Mr.
Here.
Porter, and Mr. Neely are on Zoom, or not Zoom, webinar. And we have four board members that are present, so we're all here. Let's stand for the pledge, please.
America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first action item is a motion to rescind at the request of Mr. Porter. The board will consider whether to rescind this action on August 18th, 2020 on item OAI6 to deny the expansion of Valley Robotic Academy to include grades K6 beginning with the 2020-2021 school year. I thank you, Mr. Porter, for bringing this up for rescind it. Now, I need a motion to vote on this to rescind.
Mr. Nava, Courtney Porter would like to
Yes.
send this motion and have us look again at the viability of Valley Robotics Academy.
Second, Mr. Nava.
Thank you. Been motion by Mr. Porter, second by Mr. Freitas to resent this motion, to resent this request. Let me call roll call. Mr. Everly?
Mr.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that
I'm sorry.
a yes vote is approving the rescind of the motion
Yes.
of the previous vote. So I just want to
Vote is
clarify.
approving to rescind.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Konechak,
Aye.
and Mr. Neely.
Aye.
Okay, and Mr. Porter made the motion, second by Mr. Freitas. I vote aye. Okay, motion is rescind. To go again now, we want to, item 2 is expansion of the Valley Robotic Academy to include grades K6, beginning with the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Washer.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Members of the board, we appreciate the opportunity to bring this before you again. I am going to turn it over to Mr. Bonquist.
Thank you, President Nava, Dr. Washer, members of the board. There's a presentation before you, and we also have Dr. Khan, Ms. Baha, a parent, Ms. Coburn, a teacher at Valley Robotics, and Mr. Tetagami, who should be known to the board, who works for Magnitude.io. All of them are available tonight. They have been collaborating on bringing you more information about this proposed expansion. I would like to go over the executive summary and then really turn it over to them to answer your questions and for your discussion. If you look at the executive summary, obviously there's some context about the original plan for Valley Robotics. Because of parent interest in scheduling and programming options for younger children, especially those who are already looking at or in grades 7 through 12 for Valley Robotics, there's this proposed expansion. We have current students within our district as well. We have students out of the district who are interested in this. The vision is to start with one K6 class, but to expand and separate by grade levels in the next year when we'll have the enrollment to justify that. We'll be using district adopted curriculum and STEM focused resources. Mr. Tagami can speak to that a little bit tonight. And so can Dr. Khan about some of the vision that they've been crafting for how the STEM and robotics will fold into this K6 curriculum. Students will have flexibility. They can be on campus each school day, all day, part of the day, or part of the week based on the need and preference of their parents. There will be, and Dr. Khan can speak to, individualized learning plans for each student. And we'll have partnerships with STEM-focused organizations, as well as professional development for staff. The presentation that's before you really unpacks that executive summary. A couple of things I will point out. The curriculum will be rooted in the district adopted curriculum and support programs. I think that's an important distinction to make. As well, I think you'll see there's a chart on page 5 that breaks down some of the curriculum options there. I can also, I can see that there'd be interest in the options for families, and I think that's why we invited one of the parents here tonight to speak to what is attracting them to the program. And you'll note that there's some information about the flexibility that's there, but I think that it's really important to note that these are developed by teachers. Those individualized learning plans and that flexibility, it's developed in collaboration with teachers, student, and parents for each content area. And so those objectives are very clearly laid out. They identify those resources, and these are and includes a tracking template to show student progress. These are very detailed, individualized learning plans, and there are a number of benefits to those plans that you'll also see in the expanded presentation. Mostly, it's really the flexibility and the ability to right size for student with that team collaborating on what's best for them. You'll also note that we included a sample day. This is what a day in the life might look like on page 9, something that you may have reviewed or something that we can unpack with the folks who are on standby to discuss more with you. I will let Mr. Tagami and Dr. Khan discuss the ability to partner with Magnitude.io and what that can look like. We have successfully partnered with Magnitude.io on a number of projects, and they have been really great partners, not only in the past, but even as we look at this potential expansion. Ted and Dr. Khan have been collaborating along with others to really make this something special. We've also included some professional development opportunities for teachers. We know that this is, anytime you start something new, you have a coalition of the willing, and the program grows. The program grows with the professionals that are involved, the families that are involved, and so we want to make sure that they have the supports that they need. We've really leaned into Project Lead the Way and Magnitude.io, at different levels this year, and we would continue to do that. So we included some of the professional development opportunities that teachers would be able to look at. I mentioned in the executive summary that we have a growth plan based on cohorts of students. And with that, what I think would be the most appropriate thing to do is turn it over to the team of people who are here. They can introduce themselves to you, and then they can make themselves available for any questions that you might have of them. Again, we have the principal of the school, Dr. Khan. We have Ms. Baha, a parent who is excited and interested in this opportunity. Ms. Coburn, who's a teacher at Valley Robotics. And Mr. Tagami, who has been a good partner and has been collaborating on this. And so with that, I would like to have them introduce themselves to you, and then we'll open it up to any questions or information that you'd like from them. Dr. Khan, are you here? Are you able to introduce yourself and the team of people you have?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Washer. I appreciate you giving us this time. We're happy to answer any and all questions that you have for us this evening. It's been nice. You gave us a gift. We've had an opportunity to go back and relook at things and refine them. And you can see through this that it's much more detailed than you've received before. So I thank you for that.
Dr. Khan, would you introduce the folks you have with you as well? And then
Sure.
we'll open ourselves up to the board.
So we have Christina Coburn, who is actually a science teacher at Valley Robotics. She came to us from McNair. She has very close ties with Magnitude.io and with TED, and has done many things with them over at McNair. So she is a huge asset to Valley Robotics in bringing this STEM piece on. We have Mrs. Baha, who is a parent. She currently has one student with us, David, who started with us as a 7th grader, and had a daughter that she was going to bring on for the K-6 piece. Amazing family, wonderful. So she's here to speak on behalf of VRA, what her experience has been for her first son and what she was looking forward to with her daughter. And Ted, we have with Magnitude, who goes without any introduction. You've met him before. He's an amazing man. He has been a huge contribution to the foundation of the way we're going to move with this K6 Valley Robotics. So he would be the foundation for our PBL, our project-based learning for our K6.
And with that, Mr. Nava, we have this team here and available, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Mr. Palmquist, I'd like to have these group of people talk about the robotics, okay? That way we'll have comments or questions from the board, and then we'll open it up to the public. Thank you, sir.
We got it. Dr. Khan, would you like to go ahead and facilitate that with your team?
Yeah. So I think what we should do is we could start with Mr. Kami, with Ted, with Magnitude IO. And like I said, Ms. Coburn has an extensive experience with them. And in collaboration with Magnitude, we have developed, I think, in moving forward to something pretty darn special. So go ahead, Ted.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Khan. Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. Good evening, Dr. Washer, President Nava, members of the board. We've been working with Lodi Unified for 6 years now, and we're very grateful for your staff, your students, and the ability for you guys to really be entrepreneurial, to put it bluntly. Through these 6 years, you've run 7 experiments aboard the International Space Station. Something I think you should all be very proud of, to think that there's a 6th grader out there that's now in high school that's gone through these experiences. And when we had learned about Valley Robotics Academy, we felt that was absolutely an extraordinary opportunity to start them when they're young, right? And get them excited and inspired. But I think when we look at programs like this, what's really important are those fundamentals. So without the numeracy skills, without the literacy skills as a foundational building block for these K-6 students, it's going to be really difficult for them to tackle things like robotics or what have you. But working with Dr. Khan, and we've had a great experience to work with a number of your teachers and schools throughout the district, anywhere from your primary schools launching high altitude balloons, Gabby Vasquez and the Instructional Media Services Department with all your primary school libraries, actually, when they were able to be open, to be connecting to the space station. For your middle school teachers and students, whether it's Alta Sierra or Krista McCullough and others, or even your high schools at Lodi, Tokay, McNair. And we just think this is, in a way, what's the next 5 years and what will it look like? So we're basically proposing to build a foundational program that's focused on literacy and numeracy as building blocks. And looking through that, having the science investigations leading the way. So going back to our origins, science and engineering practice being integrated, a cornerstone of the next generation science standards. So we feel through their normal coursework of reading and writing and doing their mathematics, they will be introduced to these phenomena, this world around them. Specifically, if I'll just dive into that, I know it can be a very long evening if I'm too wordy, which I have a tendency to be. Really, I think what we want to be able to do is understand the physical, the cognitive, the language, and the social and emotional needs of these young learners, especially in this age of, well, what we like to call distributed learning. Distance learning feels a little abstract to me. I really kind of think about this more like distributed computing. We're all in this one super big classroom called Earth, right? And how do we introduce new ways of connecting with our students? I don't think Zoom's going to cut it, honestly, regardless of age. I think it's important, perhaps, to check in and make sure they understand it, but we really got to get them with their hands on and engaging in extraordinary ways. So what we propose to do is essentially extend the ExoLab experience to the students directly in their homes or right there at Valley Robotics Academy by having them actually follow us along in our inquiry as we prepare for our next mission to the space station in February of 2021. These students across all those grade bands will actually be growing their own plants at home and measuring and quantifying their experience and helping us analyze the right protocols in order to actually fly our organism into space. we're working very closely with the U.S. National Laboratory on the space station and with NASA at Kennedy as we look at several different factors with these plants. I think Lodi being in San Joaquin County, it does have its foundation in agricultural communities. So there's some concerns we have. United Nations states that we have about 30 to 50 years left of topsoil on this planet before we burn through it. We have some great benefits of artificial fertilizers, but there are natural organisms that the students can investigate. There's a bacteria called rhizobia the students will study. Without it, we wouldn't have our healthy soils. It basically helps fix nitrogen in the soils through legumes. And so the students will be studying legumes and this rhizobia bacteria to look at nutrients in soil in a more natural way. But I think in addition to that, we're looking at these legumes as protein alternatives. As we look at more people on this planet, meat-based proteins are, I love my meat, honestly, but there are many that view that we'll need to be looking at alternatives in protein. So having the students looking at health and wellness, diet, and then agriculture as a component. And then for the extraordinary, the same work, because we're working along with NASA, is that 7-month voyage to Mars, which is coming up in the near term. It's basically a train schedule every 26 months. If you probably noticed, there's been a couple missions that are on the way to Mars just in the last couple months. In 26 months, you'll see several more rockets from different countries and independent organizations on the way to the Red Planet. And in 26 months after that as well. These students are living in the age of the Martian generation. By the time they're actually at NASA recruiting age in their 30s, we will have someone on the surface of that planet. So it's pretty extraordinary to introduce them at this young and impressionable age. I was 6 years old when I watched him go to the moon. And so that's one foundation piece. And then with distance learning, it can be frustrating, I think, to be able to work on these project-based experiences. We've launched a number of stratospheric balloons that get up above the ozone layer, 19 or 20 miles above the planet. If we had time, I'd have our students speak to this. They really, I think, can firsthand describe the experience that they had designing, building, communicating with the Federal Aviation Administration, modeling their flight. And of course, then we're sent out to go grab it and deliver that back to the school. But what we're proposing for this school year is an erratic balloon launch using a super pressure balloon. We had a couple trials that we ran over the summer, and we got as far as Japan, so about 3/4 away around the Earth before we lost our signal. So I think working with Valley Robotics and frankly, the entire district there, I think we can see that achieved. Wouldn't that be wonderful to have the 30,000 students at Lodi Unified participating in an around the world balloon experience? We hope that these students at K through 6 and even the older students there at Valley Robotics will be firsthand involved in helping set the precedent for what's to come. In addition to that, I think I'll just make note that as we're thinking about opening this up to K through 6, we also want to think about the program as it's developed for our rising high school students. We've worked very closely with the U.S. Department of Education, and we were expecting to announce this in spring, but the pandemic shut things down. But if it's a Perkins program, which I believe Valley Robotics does qualify under Perkins, there is a career and technical education contest, if you will, program that the U.S. Department of Education has just released a couple weeks ago. We're consultants on that. We're providing firsthand experience and knowledge to help students design, and that's just the design phase for a CubeSat, to actually build or design a CubeSat to eventually to be constructed, tested, launched, and managed in orbit. If you think about that as a 5-year plan, it's something I think that can definitely be done just based on what I've seen your district able to do on the International Space Station. And so that's a program that's open now. The closing proposals are due in October 9th. I think working with Valley Robotics, if they have students that have an interest, and if it is indeed a Perkins qualified school, that I recommend that they work on that. And then I think what I'll end with, I do get wordy sometimes, is we've been very grateful to be a guest scientist on a robot that it's actually 3 robots that are on the International Space Station right now. They're being set into motion, going through their tests. They're called Astro Bees. They're 30-centimeter cubes, or think about a 12 inches on a side cube. They're free flyers. They have fans and a number of sensors. very similar to our Exo Lab, where we fly a plant in space, and then we have classrooms around the world now growing their plants in their classrooms. We're going to have this Astro Bee robot with a digital nose. It's going to be sniffing gases in microgravity in about 2 years, 18 to 24 months. We've got STTR grant from NASA as a subcontractee, and we're looking forward to that program. While the students are studying gases in microgravity has things behaving completely differently than here on Earth. We would like the students to also be thinking about air quality here on our planet, and with the fires and with things like pandemics, air and particulates in the air and other things like that. I think it's very timely. This is a multi-year project, but we're really looking forward to that as well. So I'd say that with the leadership of Dr. Khan and her staff, and having worked with Chris Coburn in the past, I think they're really well suited to bringing in a new program. And as I understand it, it looks like you're probably reaching outside of your normal district boundaries with folks that have an interest. So we're very excited to take direction from Dr. Khan and Jeff Palmquist and the team there to deliver what we need to make a difference on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you,
very-
Ted.
Go ahead, Dr.
Jeff,
Khan.
Do you mind if I jump in for a second? Because
Please.
this is where my K-6 background. I was a first grade teacher, kindergarten teacher, fourth grade teacher in Lodi, fifth grade teacher. So you go all these concepts. You're like, okay, how can a kindergartner do this? That just seems very complex. You just take it down to the point where you say, if we're growing something, it's a bean or seed. You have kiddos that are going to color code them. You're going to have them put them in patterns. Are they going to do the level that our, fourth graders? No. But can they do addition problems using these things? Can they do writing associated with it? Can they look at clouds? Can they look at weather? Absolutely. So this is the foundation for the project-based learning. And then each grade level will have their standards met for what's appropriate for them in their writing. It's going to all be cross-curricular. It'll be social studies, science, mathematics, ELA, writing all together. So I hope that it seems like as he talks, I'm like, gosh, that sounds really smart for my little guys, but we bring it down to their level.
Dr. Khan, might we hear from Ms. Baha, parent,
Absolutely.
about her experience and what she's excited about the potential for
Absolutely.
elementary?
Go ahead, Ms. Baha.
Can you hear me?
We can. Yes, we can hear you. You may be muted now, Ms. Baha. We could hear you for a second there.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. My son started at Valley Robotics. He's now an 8th grader and absolutely loves it. And we love it as well. Probably one of the things that makes it so unique to us and so special is the fact that their focus is on not so much teaching they recognize that each student has a different learning style and they cater to that learning style. And they give the student also the freedom to choose that. And I can honestly say my son loves every bit of it and he misses it. He misses school and that's never happened to him before. He is excelling now and he's had straight A's in 7th grade. It has allowed us the freedom to complete his work at his pace, at his own schedule. And then we as parents, I'm also a former educator. And so my husband and I have taken trips with him because he has that flexibility in his schedule. And he's allowed to expand in certain areas that really reach him in his style of learning. And we have been able to take trips and just really dive into certain areas. And it's just brought learning to life for him. And it's been amazing.
Ms. Baja, when you think about the elementary possibility for your younger child, what are the things that that you heard Dr. Khan and Ted Tagami and others in your experience of Valley Robotics? What kind of jumps out at you? Why would you want to make that choice for your younger student?
It sounds extremely exciting. When I was hearing Ted just talk about all that, it's very exciting. It's actually what is happening in the world now and what is our future. And so therefore, if we can bring that into the kids that are younger and reach them obviously at their level, they will not understand that high level yet, but it's an introduction and it really sparks their creativity, and it's hugely important. It ignites that whole passion for them for learning. I believe learning is fun, enjoyable, and exciting, and it's very appealing to me. I really think the kids would enjoy it in that manner.
Okay, well, thank you very much. President Nava, you've had a chance to hear from some of the team.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist and Dr. Khan, Ted, Ms. Baja. Thank you for the thorough explanation of the robotics K6 and more. I'd like to have some questions from the board. I'd like to call on Mr. Porter first. Mr. Porter, any questions for the staff on the robotics school? You're muted. Courtney, you're muted. You're muted.
Got it. I have a couple questions for Mr. Palmquist. Sorry about that.
Okay.
First of all, you said K through 6, you would have only one teacher. Is that correct?
Correct. We have one teacher, basically one teacher per cohort of students. So as we can expand more cohorts, we can add more teachers.
And what's the student to teacher ratio on that K through 6?
I believe we're shooting for 20 students.
Okay, and then how is and this is just me, broad strokes, how is that teacher going to deal with all the different levels and levels within levels by themselves? Are they going to have support? Are they going to have support?
Absolutely, they'll have support, but I think Dr. Khan can probably explain it best. She's not only taught that way, she's also run programs like that. So she can probably talk to you about how to do each level. Dr. Khan, can you answer Mr. Porter's question?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of this. If you can kind of think of the old school one-room schoolhouse where you have all the kids together, it doesn't matter what grade they are. You're not sequestered into your 4th grade, you're doing 4th grade reading, you're doing 4th grade math. If I have a kindergarten who's reading at 2nd grade level, by golly, they're going to be with the 2nd grade level readers. So so you could see a mishmash of a kindergartner and a 1st grader working together because they're on the same level in math. You could have, a 6th and a 4th grader, the 4th graders reading up with the 6th grader. Also being able to use, it's pretty cute because one of my kiddos came to pick up some stuff today and she's a 10th grader and she goes, really, we're going to have kids? Oh, I would love to peer teach them. So using our older kids to help peer teach in there. So there's always a support for the teacher there. Also, I've done this 2 different districts and it is a lot of work. Absolutely. They will have support, but a lot of times the kids level themselves out. So it's not as here's kindergarten, here's 2nd grade, here's 3rd grade, because they're put where their level is, as they should be. They will be, there may be a 3rd grader that reads at that 1st grade level. That's okay. That's where we put them. Does that kind of answer it?
Oh, very much so. Thank you. I have one more question. Could you explain to me just real quickly how you're going to, how can I put this? This is difficult.
It's okay.
How do you spread out the day so it's hands-on versus screen time? How's that?
Well, once we're there, again, I was a kindergarten, first grade teacher. You got to move. You don't have an option just to sit there. Every 15 minutes, there's a change. So once we're in, so when we're distance learning, there'll be activities that are sent home. There'll be art activities that they can do. I'm a firm believer, if this is the old school me, if something goes on a wall, it's not just art for art. It's either connected to reading, writing, math, science, social studies. It all connects. So all those will be sent home. We'll need to get that going. You heard about the labs that can go home. I think they call them kitchens. I can't remember how with Ted. Sorry, Ted. So they need those. Screen time is not where these little guys need to be. If screen time for them is going to be fun, just playing through a game, learning, my addition facts. But they need contact. They need, manipulatives, hands-on.
Great. Dr. Khan and Mr. Palmquist and Mrs. Baha, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Did I leave anybody out?
Mrs. Colburn's, I don't know if you have any questions for her. She's our science guru.
No, she knows more than I do, so I'm going to stay away
Me
from her.
too.
Ted also, Courtney. Ted.
So anyway, I just want to say thank you very much for your presentation. And Mr. Nava, I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. I'll go to Mr. Heberly. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Mr. Porter kind of touched on my first question, and again, it was the concern I had about having 7 grade levels in one room. And let's face it, the needs are extremely different. We're trying to get kids to read, and there's kind of a teacher-driven versus computer-driven, and it doesn't matter if you send them off to amplify and they do kind of whatever lesson they're supposed to do. Somewhere along the line, they're going to need teacher contact to help them with phonics, with sentence structure, with beginning and ending sounds and blending. And so how is that going to work for the little ones?
Well, what you can do at this time would be, I would call it a virtual carpet time, where if I was sitting there as a teacher, I would have my easel, I would have my, we call them cold writes, where we do sentence structure. So you would have all those things set up to where you would run a normal day, even though they're not physically with you. And also, we also have Mrs. Coburn too, if you would like to have her answer some of the stuff too. But on a virtual end, then we have centers, and maybe the centers they have there at home that they need to do, but I'm there, or the teacher is there via internet to say, hey, everybody pull out this thing, and they're doing hands-on stuff. So a lot, again, I'm used to, back in the day, centers, everything is hands-on, everything's manipulative. So same concept, we just send those packets home. I could be on the other side, meaning the teacher on the other side, walking them through the process.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to, that's kind of the main question I have, is how do I, excuse me, wrap my head around 7 different grade levels.
Yeah.
And while the teacher is doing, 1 or 2 levels, then you've got 5 levels not
Right.
engaged with that. They're
Can
engaged
I
obviously
have-
with something else.
Yeah, can I have Mrs. Colburn answer that for you?
Oh, absolutely. However, that's fine. Sure.
Miss Colburn would be perfect for that.
I'm sorry, I don't see a Miss Colburn on here. What was the first name?
Christina Colburn?
I do not see that name on the attendees.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, she's texting, sorry.
Dr. Khan, why don't you go ahead and try to complete his
So we
answer
can
to
use
that
that
question.
time, right? So as kiddos are doing hands-on things, we can use that time as intervention. So think of it as breakout groups where I've got a group over here doing this project. I'm starting on another group, then I can pull 5 kids in with me that we're working on reading strategies, that it's, you know, we can see each other on the Zoom or whatever it is at the moment. Now, once we get back into a classroom, that's totally different. So we differentiate it, knowing that if the other little kiddos have a question, they can pop back on and ask me a question to help them. If you look at kind of the sample day, it kind of shows you what we would do and break out, and then be able to, there's at the end of the day, there's kind of not a free time. It was a choice time and an intervention time where then peers could come in and work with the kiddos that are working on, and we could do it virtually, work on with the kids with their projects. We could also give me the time, there we go, give me the time to be able to teach, or the teacher, I keep saying me, but the teacher, time to do the intervention where the weak spots are. I know it's really hard to conceive. I understand that completely. But with peer support, and you'd be amazed watching even like a 6th grader who is going to support a 3rd grader. Teaching another student actually helps you learn yourself. In fact, I had an 8th grader last, or 8th grader last year that said, can I help so-and-so? Because if I talk it out loud, I learn it myself. Absolutely, you can. So I know it's really, really hard to conceive, but I believe me, it can be done, and it's beautiful.
Okay. There are some broad, I guess, concepts about the whole Valley Robotics for me. One of them is I really do like the possibility of parental choice. And I have to say, I understand secondary more than I understand elementary. Because that's comfortable for me, and that's kind of where I've done things. I am absolutely sold on project-based learning, on hands-on and STEM, and that's been through, 25 years plus with involved in Science Olympiad. Kids really learn an incredible amount by project-based, by hands-on, by doing those things. But they do have to have a foundation. They need reading skills. They need math skills. Some of the events, they absolutely have to have writing skills. So it's that foundational stuff that the younger kids need. I want to make sure that they're getting it before I blanketly say, yeah, let's just throw these kids in there and hopefully it'll work. And it's not that I doubt any of the skill or commitment of the teaching staff. It just seems, like you said, it's a difficult concept, and it seems very cumbersome to me. So that's kind of the hard part of it. Very easily, I can see 7 through 12, even 6th grade is a real formative year for kids, and so that part of it is easier for me to wrap around to see how kids would actually do that kind of work. And just a little plug for Magnitude.io. I've been a big fan of them since the introduction to this district. I think Magnitude.io is incredible. The only thing I would say is I want them to be at every single school in the district. And I'm looking at Dr. Washer, and she's smiling and nodding. So I'll take that as a yes, she will do that. So yeah, it is not in any way that I doubt project-based, hands-on STEM. Like I've said, I don't know how many times already. That is how you engage kids, keep them engaged, and help them have some semblance of This is why we're doing it. It really shows them relevance. I still grapple with the whole idea of the combination. Here we have been talking about it for years as a board about combination classes. Now all of a sudden we're not going to do 2 grade levels. We're going to do 7. And that is something I'm having a hard time with. So it is not Valley Robotics. It is not all those other things. I just worry that we would not be able to give the kids what they need foundationally. And at that point, I will stop, Mr. Nava. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Ms. McFarland.
Thank you, President Nava. I would like to echo what my other board members have said. I'm in support of Valley Robotics, and I have the utmost faith in Dr. Khan and Mr. Palmquist. My concerns are more broad-based. That are the children getting enough face-to-face, and they're not sitting on a computer doing a kind of a tutorial type on basics that Mr. Heberly said. The project-based learning, I'm a big fan of. I just want to make sure that at those younger grades that we are hitting the bases, their standards are being met, and those are where my concerns fall. This is an opportunity for the district to do some amazing things, and I think that Valley Robotics has a big mountain to climb, but I think the people that are behind it, I have the utmost faith in. And I'm anxious to see. My concerns will be put to rest as we get there. I concern if we start with 20 in K through 6, what happens if by December we now have 40 or 60 that want to be there? Can we, and I know more teachers will come in and it'll spread out. My concern is that we show the bells and whistles. And let me tell you, I'm ready to be Ted's assistant and volunteer, and I will do anything he asks because I want to go. So if he's got, an almost 6-year-old woman excited about a balloon, I can imagine what a 9-year-old little boy or little girl is going to do with it. And so I want to make sure that our bells and whistles that we're selling, we're not missing the foundation blocks and the face-to-face with the teachers, because the bells and whistles are amazing. And I don't want to downplay the bells and whistles, because I think this is where we need to be to lock students into school. And for that student, this is an amazing opportunity. I guess where I'm concerned is this almost feels like it's an independent study. Jeff, and maybe you can explain that to me a little bit, but it feels like we're selling it as a school, but it's actually an independent study, and it has all these amazing components. Am I off base on that? Or am I in the range of it? Because it feels to me like it's an independent study.
So, I mean, in essence, it depends on what you mean by independent study. I mean, is there that level of flexibility that people come to expect out of independent study? Yes, that's the type of flexibility. The difference is a lot of times independent study programs, they're not seen as face-to-face instruction, or that a kid goes to school on a bell schedule every day. There's a live schedule every single day at Valley Robotics. Of course, right now we're in distance learning, so obviously we're under the same parameters as everyone else. But when this time passes, what's different from this program and maybe traditional independent study program is student can go to school all day, every day for the whole school period. There is live instruction with teachers and classmates and peers. But there is that independent study flexibility built in, where kids do create, like in independent study programs, individual learning plans. That's something you don't necessarily get in a traditional setting. So I think maybe the way to say it is some of the flexible components that people really are attracted to an independent study are built there. But those core classroom components, some of the things that the board rightfully has questions about to make sure are in place, they're also there. So when you're sensing that it feels like an independent study program, there is that flexibility, and there are some of those components, but that's not the core. The core vision and mission isn't to be a independent study program with some robots. It is a school community that's large, that has all the things that normal school communities, I say normal, I'll put air quotes around that, traditional school communities have. But there is that flexibility built in, which is what Ms. Baha and other parents are looking for. They want the ability to maybe accelerate in some ways, maybe to pull back in some ways, and they'll work in concert with their teachers and Dr. Khan and the team to right size that for them.
And
Mr.
I do like the
Nava?
feel of that. Go ahead.
I interrupted, sorry. I think Christina is able to come on now and she might be able to better answer these questions for you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, put her on, Miss Dr. Khan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Washer, Mr. Nava, and members of the board. I am Christina Coburn, and I work there at Valley Robotics as a science teacher, as you guys heard before. I just kind of wanted to I wanted to hear the question again so I could make sure that I'm answering it completely.
I'm not sure.
You want me to do it? Well, hi, Ms. Colburn. This is Ron Heberly. The main concern I have is for the primary kids. How are they going to get what they need to get and not sit in front of a computer all day? I really believe that things like Amplify and Dreambox, I have to tell you, I have concerns about both of those, and a lot of them are, there's no human teaching them. I strongly believe in teacher contact time and building those foundations so that they can understand and work with all those other great things that were, you know, like Ms. McFarland said, the bells and whistles. And I don't mean that in any negative way. Yeah, I mean, this is right up my alley with how I believe education should be. But again, I view it easier with the older kids than I do with the primary kids. So my concern is how does that work for the younger kids?
Okay, so there's a few different ways. First of all, I just want to say that I completely understand your concerns. I have a daughter who is in kindergarten, and she's doing distance learning right now. And I'm just as concerned as you are about screen time. So there's that.
Yes.
I'm actually, I've had a situation with her where she, maybe isn't doing as well on Dreambox and is starting to get tired of Dreambox and is tired of looking at the screen. And so an example for something that I would do with her if I was a teacher or if I was mentoring her teacher, right, at Valley Robotics, would be to, bring in something like something physical, the number cubes, the manipulatives, things like that. So they're still getting the same content and they're still getting the same material, and they're meeting those standards and they're meeting those checkpoints that they need to be at, but they can learn it in different ways. And so some of the solutions that a teacher who has a lot of different grade levels or content to teach would be things like we've put in the schedule, like centers. So kids wouldn't be grouped together like, oh, all of the kids are going to be on a computer, but they're going to be doing something different. Instead, it might be maybe they spend 5 minutes at a center doing Dreambox, but then they spend 10 minutes at a center doing something with manipulatives, learning the same content, and they're rotating based on whatever their grade level is. And the teacher sets it up and says, okay, if you're 5th grade, you're doing this at this center. If you're 4th grade, you're doing this at this center. Or maybe they have a list of students that need to work on a certain concept, and they say if you're, in this group of students, then you're working at this center. So really it has a lot to do with classroom management. And as long as the teacher has that background and they know how to manage a classroom of, small, younger students who are at different grade levels, which honestly, that just kind of comes with the job. I think that given the schedule that we've given them, and then also that intervention time, if you look at the time between 12:15 and 12:30, we've actually scheduled in an independent reading time that also includes the math and ELA intervention. That's a huge piece. Intervention is a big deal, and being able to identify which students need help in which content areas and then give them that additional time and that additional support with the teacher or with a student who is maybe stronger in that concept is a big deal. And that's something that we definitely plan on doing throughout the entire program. But then having the PBL as the enrichment piece. So it's there and it's the basis and it's the excitement and it's the spark and it's the thing that keeps those kids wanting to learn so that they can understand what they're doing with TED and what they're doing at Valley Robotics.
Thank you, Ms. Coburn. One other piece I'll add to send it back to Mr. Nava is, there are content area experts at Valley Robotics as well in every single content area. And I know that Dr. Khan's intention is to really take a team approach in order to make sure that the collective wisdom of that site and the other students and the families, this really will be a collaborative effort to make sure that we're as excited as we are to work with TED and to do all the things that TED does. I liked what he said. This has got to be focused on numeracy and literacy in order for them to understand all the wonderful things that he has in store. And I know that I've met Ted in Berkeley at their facility, and as we've talked, I know that he is an expert in this way. So I know that he'll help to support us and hold us accountable to the numeracy and literacy as well, because he obviously needs those students to be prepared with not only all their basic skills, but with that intellectual curiosity so that they can literally go to Mars. And I think that that is, it sounds crazy to maybe to me sitting here, but for the kindergartner who comes to Valley Robotics, that's a real possibility for them. So that's just personally, I'd like to add that I know that this is a team approach with content area experts in every single content area at Valley Robotics. I know Dr. Khan has done this before, has the elementary background, and can utilize her team to build this program. It is an exploration. We don't practice on kids unless we feel like we have a really good team and plan in place. So I'll send that back to you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Jeff. Are you finished, Ms. McFarland? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, President Nava, and thank you everyone for your presentation here today. Obviously, no one has any problems with the Valley Robotics Academy. In fact, we applaud and commend it. And not simply, Mr. Palmquist, does it go unnoticed that Dr. Khan, Mrs. Coburn are stolen from McNair High School. And so, Mrs. Coburn and Ted over at Magnitude IO have forgotten more about science than I think most people will ever know. So that is not being called in question at all. And especially when you put this type of team together, it can only be a success, and especially with the opportunities that we're creating. I too, though, share the concerns that my other board members have brought, and that is that this kindergartner in this program is going to be taught by Lodi teachers and receive the Lodi unified experience and not be taught by a video game. So I don't know which one of you wants to make that pledge to me here tonight once again, but that's what I want to hear loud and clear. So is that going to be you, Mr. Palmquist, Dr. Khan, Mrs. Coburn, all of you, none of you? I mean, this is...
Mr. Freitas, I will absolutely make that pledge to you and promise to you that they will have that hands-on direct contact with teachers. They're littles. I know what it looks like. They need to be with a person. They need to have a relationship. They need to touch, feel, read. That relationship part with the teacher is imperative. So absolutely.
I agree. Again, this is Mrs. Coburn. I wouldn't even be a part of this if that was on the table. I wouldn't even think about it. Again, like I said, I have a kindergartner, and I would never put her through that or anybody else's kids. So, and we wouldn't be partnering with TED if we had any intention of just sitting kids in front of computers. It just wouldn't happen.
I can weigh in here. We need technology to do the extraordinary things we do in space. One thing that we realized and really pushed through our entire organization at Magnitude when the pandemic hit was observe the world around you, right? We had students and teachers just going out their back door, closing their eyes and listening, right? look for how many different insects they could find, or the different plants in their backyard or in their front yard. And so the powers of observation, I think, are really important now more than ever to instill in these young people, to keep them curious, keep them engaged, and with the foundational work that I think that Dr. Khan can do with that literacy piece and the numbers. I think you will end up really, I think, as a research and development component of the Lodi Unified School District. What happens there, if it's done the way I'm imagining of what it's been shared with me, I can see the best practices kind of being filtered throughout the district. So I'm looking forward to what happens over the next few years. And I'm really grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Palmquist, I haven't heard from you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted someone. You want everyone. I think we can all make that pledge. Yep, that is absolutely the focus.
Well, I think people in the district know my history. I'm the black sheep that went to law, but my mom taught first grade for 40 years, inspired my sister, my cousins, everyone else into this. So I've spent a lot of time in a first grade classroom, putting up the alphabet and taking it down. So this is very, very important to me. I don't believe this type of teaching cannot be done without our teachers. And I think anything Mr. Palmquist sets out to do, that Dr. Washer sets out to do, Dr. Khan and Mrs. Coburn and Magnitude IO set out to do, they're going to accomplish. And I'm very impressed with this presentation. I'm impressed what I hear with this tonight. I have full faith in everything they're accomplished, and you're going to have my support in the vote. So.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. I'll go to Mr. Knaxat. Gary?
Yep. Thank you, President Nava. I just have comments. I don't really have any questions, but one comment, and as I was listening to all this, is that not all students learn in the same way. And Valley Robotics Academy offers additional options for kids. And so, well, that's a good thing. I'm always in favor of providing opportunities to kids, and Valley Robotics gives Lodi Unified another tool in its toolbox. Again, I in these sentences for kids, and because that's what we're all about. If parents don't like it, if the kids are not doing well in this type of environment, they don't have to stay there. They can go back to the traditional classroom. So, I mean, this is not a lifetime commitment to a kid. One bonus thing that, as far as this, I think the school district looks at, is that it also plugs a hole for potential charter schools to fill that void that if we don't offer this. So I'm all in, and thank you for the presentation. You didn't have to convince me, though. I was already there.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. First of all, I want to begin by thanking Mr. Porter for bringing this back. We really appreciate that and gave us a chance to discuss this. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Porter. I also want to thank everybody who was involved in the presentation. You guys did a great job. Got some comments. First of all, I was worked with Mr. Palmquist as the Valley Robotics was founded, and Dr. Khan as well. And they said from the beginning, Dr. Khan had a vision for this, and Jeff did as well. They had a vision for this, and they've really done it. I'm really, really impressed. Now, we may think of Valley Robotics as an innovative academy, and it is as far as public education goes. But things like this have been successful in other places as well, both private and charter schools. When I started with Able Charter in 2011, we had individual learning plans for all of our kids, all of them. Not an IEP, but an ILP. And tagged with that, we had educational mentors. So every teacher was a mentor. You might have 11 students. Everyone, the technician had some students. Everyone had students, and you worked with them. You met with them once a week and looked at their individual learning plans and looked at their grades. So that's a fantastic thing. That helps you develop this kind of style that you've got, where kids can go at different times and they don't have to be there all day. Sorry, I'm looking over here. I've got my notes. I think this K6 is a great idea. We're going to start with that. One of the best ways to learn something is to have to teach it. I found that out when I first got my 6th grade class, and I had all of these English language rules that I had to learn about how to use a colon and a semicolon and all that kind of thing. So, and I can recite it now. So that's a great thing. So our older kids are going to review and get it, and they're going to work with the younger kids. And let's face it, sometimes younger kids would rather listen to somebody just a couple years older than they are than a teacher. So this is all of a group thing, and you're going to have a Lodi unified certified teacher there supervising everything, doing the instruction and all that. So that's fantastic. And Mr. Headley, I understand your feelings about a combo class. You know, I fought with you, side by side with you against combo classes ever since you and I got on the board almost 10 years ago. If we were doing instruction the way that we normally do, you can't have that many. But this is a different setup. It's broader. We've got some older kids who can help us with the younger kids. I have a feeling this is going to be a great program, and I'm very excited about that. Project-based learning. I can't say enough about that. That's exactly what we did. I had a class, I taught careers for 11 and 12 in my last few years, and I had a project for them, and it was called a scenario-based learning project. And I gave the kids a scenario, and that was their project. They had to develop everything about it. They had to develop spreadsheets for the financial end of it. They had to develop marketing materials. They had to develop an executive summary to put out. They had to develop a whole presentation using Google Slides. And they'd work in small groups of 4 to 5. And they loved it. This was a big deal for those kids because they got to actually show what they had learned. And they were just like really into it. So I think we're doing a great thing for our kids here. Now we talk about screen time. When we talk about screen time like it's a bad thing. Screen time is not a bad thing, okay? Too much screen time is a bad thing. But screen time in and of itself is not. And technology is not meant to be the teacher. It's a tool that a really good teacher uses extensively to help the kids learn as they go along. And actually, I say learn, I should say discover, because that's what it's all about, is discovering as you move along. So, and if you look at the Valley Robotics daily schedule there, very little screen time on there. I was surprised. Actually, very little on there. So, with that, that's all I've got. Thank you very much to everybody who's worked on this. I greatly appreciate it, and you have undoubtedly got my support on this. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, George. The way I feel is anytime that we have an opportunity in this district to give these kids something that's new, something that is going to be taught by people that are aware of what to teach, how to teach, and how to program those people, regardless of what level they are. I know that those people in the trenches that Jeff and Dr. Khan have put together, I have no questions and no problems in supporting this concept. I supported it on the first time we mentioned it because, like I said, the opportunity for kids is the most important thing. And this board has always had the philosophy that any time that we deal with kids and there's an opportunity for them to participate in new programs and that type of stuff, that we can benefit them, the parents, and everybody can involve, the teachers, I am for it. I'd like to ask for any public comments. Michelle, have any public comments on this?
We have two so far, and it's Sarah Edwards.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi. Thank you for hearing me out tonight. I wanted to talk to you guys about putting my son into this school. I was so excited when I first heard about it because it was like a light at the end of the tunnel. My son is in 5th grade and he is on the autism spectrum with Asperger's, and the distance learning model that we are currently in is failing him. I mean, his teacher is amazing, but he has 30 students in his class, and the rigidity of his schedule that he's on just doesn't work for him. So I was quite disappointed when we were told that, you know, Valley Robotics would not go forward. We've been trying to push through, but I really hope that you guys approve for them to go forward, because this would make a world of difference for him. He was so excited to possibly go to a school where people would understand him and he would be able to have a smaller group size and be able to have a teacher more one-on-one. And so if we could give that back to him, I would feel like it would make a complete change in his life. So I ask that you please don't fail our students. So many kids are going to fall into the gap if we do not do something. We have to offer them another service, because this model of distance learning right now does not work. And going forward in class, my son could excel in areas I couldn't even imagine. So I really hope that you guys approve this measure for the sake of my son. So thank you all for hearing me out.
Thank you, Sarah. We have one more public comment, Michelle.
We actually have two more. Jessica, two more.
Two more.
Jessica Kemper.
Yes. Jessica, you're.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, and Dr. Washer. I'm going to take 30 seconds to be negative Nelly because I put in for public comment in item 1 and didn't get called. So I would just like to say I was very frustrated in the last board meeting when the decision was made to reverse the opening of Valley Robotics, that it was done without discussion. It left us parents that were excited for the opportunities for our children a mere 3 days away, wondering what had happened, what had gone wrong, and why the decision was suddenly reversed with no explanation and no discussion for us to know where the program stood. We had no idea if it was a stop forever or a stop for the school year or what. We were left wondering 3 days before school started. I thought I had this wonderful opportunity for my son and a wonderful experience for him to go in at a school that was going to do 10 times better for him than our general ed programs do. And 3 days before school was started, it was ripped out from under us with no explanation. So thank you for bringing that back and reversing the decision and considering the program again. I have a 5th grader in the district, plays on a travel ice hockey team, has ADHD, has a million friends one day and no friends the next, as it goes at 10 years old. But the traditional school system doesn't work for him. He has been leaps and bounds ahead of his classmates in math since kindergarten. And in our traditional school settings, we have no process for acceleration. We don't offer 1st graders the option to do 2nd grade math. We don't offer any type of acceleration in our normal day programs, and it leaves our kids floundering and frustrated. And then I'm getting I'm getting notes home from the teacher of, your child was goofing off in class today. Well, yes, because he did everything you taught in a 30-minute lesson in the first 2 minutes, which, again, that's partly his problem. My child needs to behave in class. But knowing there was something on the horizon that would let him work to his benefits, let him accelerate in math, let him get ahead and enjoy school and the subjects that he loves and not feel constantly held back, I was so excited. He was excited. And then it was gone. So I'm really hoping that this goes well tonight. We need another option for our students. Traditional school settings don't work for every child. I actually pulled him distance learning. He had 4 hours a day of Zoom calls. Again, my skilled child in some subjects was done with classwork and homework in the first 10 minutes and had to sit through another 45 minutes of a lesson. It wasn't going well. I had a 10-year-old crying every day because it was failing him. So I pulled him and I put him in Independence, and he's doing great there. But it's still not the perfect option. I work in the district office. When we're back in the building full time and the kids go back to school, what do I do with him? So having an opportunity for him to be in a school that will let him accelerate and work with him where he's at while still giving him the option of a traditional school day is huge. And I really hope we see it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. One more public comment, please.
Yes, Michelle Oregon.
Okay, Michelle.
Good evening, President Nava. Question is, can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Hard to tell, and sorry, my voice is going due to our environmental hazards right now. We have a couple of questions. We do think, as Ms. Kempler described, this opportunity for varying students that maybe don't fit inside, the regular four walls of a classroom. This might be an opportunity. However, we do have more questions. Since the first time it was presented, we understood that it was using Apex as a model, as a base curriculum. With this new presentation, we see Magnitude IO, which I know several classrooms from sixth grade through high school have used. I know some of those schools have raised lots of money through their PTA in order to do those exo labs at school. I heard the gentleman speak tonight about writing curriculum for this kind of program. I understand that this is not a regular kind of science class. In my search for understanding, I was told that we would use the district curriculum. However, on the professional development and things for the teachers, and what was discussed tonight was Magnitude IO, Project Lead Their Way, which are great hands-on project-based activities. But as we all know that, that is the pie in the sky. I think as Mr. Neely talked about, thematic type teaching, project-based teaching, reaching a wide gamut of abilities is a great thing to do. Here, I am very unsure about K-6 abilities and making sure that you're meeting the needs of teaching the alphabet to a sixth grader who's doing pre-algebra. So with one teacher, that definitely does make me a little nervous as to how that can be done. I'm not saying it can't, but I don't know that all of the questions are answered with that. The other is the cost. The cost of my understanding, Magnitude IO for just one expo lab is close to $1,000. And I know every classroom in this district would love to have exo labs. Even if they just had one in every library to be able to do would be phenomenal. To do some of the different CAN units that were, I think it's TED, discussed, we're talking, $2,500. So is that for all of Valley Robotics? Is that bringing something that Valley Robotics already has down to K6? So we have some questions on cost, some questions on the opportunity, because this is starting after the school year. I think it's important that we do start with someone who's experienced. And I think giving the opportunity to a teacher that is within the district, I know that's hard, pulling them away from a class that's already started, but I cannot imagine hiring a brand new teacher to do K-6 in a brand new program. So that I hope if we go forward that we give the opportunity to our current staff to apply for this position. Looking at the daily schedule, I am concerned with how could there not be more screen time. I heard the assurances of the screen time, but if I'm teaching the alphabet to a kindergartner, how do I make sure that my 5th and 6th grader are not just plugged into a computer to do their math lesson? So while I see it as carpet time starting out the day, I question how can you do that with a kindergartner and 6th grader? And depending on who applies, if there's 5 kindergartners and 5 6th graders, and then you just have the in between. I like the idea of the middle school and high school teachers partnering, but that would also be a change in job description if they're coming down to help teach the K-6. So more questions to be answered. We all just adopted brand new Amplify Science, I think last year. Time is kind of a blur right now with all of us being at home, but I think there's some project-based activities in there. I don't think there's much coding, but I know that there are lots of programs that our teachers do use currently for coding throughout the district. So I would caution on big extravagant expenses for something that we might not be able to support in 2 years as we're looking at budget cuts, because that is weighing heavy on all of our minds. So lots of questions, and I don't know if we have any of those answers tonight.
Jeff, do you have any answers tonight?
What's the specific question? I think Dr. Cohn answered some of those pieces.
Well,
do you have a specific question, Michelle?
So with the idea of morning meeting and carpet time, does Ms. Khan really believe that, in teaching the alphabet, that amount of time is enough for kindergartners? And would 6th graders really be sitting down at that time with those kiddos? I guess we can go through this.
Go ahead, Mr. Palmquist.
I can have I believe Dr. Khan addressed that about how to differentiate in her presentation.
Yes, you did.
I do understand differentiation. How can you, though, do carpet time with both kinder and 6th graders at the same time? I would think that the schedule itself would lead to what I think screen time for part of the group while the other is meeting with the teacher. So
Mr. Nava, if I may add a suggestion, if Ms. Orgon has specific questions about the instructional model, she can meet with Dr. Khan at at their convenience and go over it in more detail.
Did you hear that, Michelle, from Dr. Washer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nava.
Okay.
I guess then the next question is tonight's action to go forward, are we looking at changing the curriculum to go using Magnitude IO? If so, would that need to go before curriculum council before being used? Unless
Mr. Knight,
it's just,
members of the board, the base curriculum will be the district adopted curriculum. Other pieces will be added as support material, just as other schools do.
thank you.
That the answer? Mhm.
And with going forward with teachers, I think looking for an experienced teacher within the district before we go outside for someone who's new would be Leah ask. We appreciate the idea of a project-based multi-grade. K6 seems real big, and a big chunk to undertake, and agree that there is much to this that is positive in nature, and an opportunity for getting students who don't fit inside those four walls like a normal classroom. So I guess I look forward to, as we read it, we read that Magnitude IO and I forget what the STEP Project Their Way and Step into Action kits are pretty expensive. So we're just curious in these budget cuts, the time and cost of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, we'll continue on with the next thing I would like to have is a motion on this robotic expansion. Entertain a motion, please.
Motion approved.
Mr. Neely,
Yes, sir.
motion to approve, second?
Second.
Second.
Mr. Porter, second.
Okay, second by Mr. Porter. To expand the expansion of the Valley Robotic Academy. Mr. Heberly,
Aye.
Mr. Freitas, Mr. Knacksack,
Aye.
Ms. McFarland, Mr. Nava, yes. Mr. Porter and Mr. Neely are up. Motion carries 7-0. All right, Jeff, you're on. Get her done. Get your stuff together, and good thing that this expansion of the robotics school has gone.
Mr. Nava, I have a comment. May I? Thank you so much. I do have a soapbox, and my soapbox is STEM. And I just want to remind everybody that what I'm holding here is a informational pamphlet for Measure U that we put out to the public. I love referring to this, okay? And it says, in one little category, it says, what is Measure U? And it explains the facilities and all that other stuff. Well, the part that I want to just kind of throw it out there and remind everybody is it says, Measure U would help improve and upgrade classrooms so that all students have access to these educational programs and the technology necessary to prepare them for college and career. And that's under the heading of science, technology, engineering, and math. So I just want to make sure that, and this was one of my hopes and wishes, is that when we do start Valley Robotics, which we did obviously a while back, is that we would not neglect our other school sites in STEM instruction and project-based instruction. I think Magnitude IO is a wonderful example of what can happen. I know that the WOW Museum locally does a lot of site presentations, and all of that just exposes kids to level appropriate science and math, technology, and engineering. So when I first mentioned it, when we were talking about Valley Robotics earlier this evening, and I mentioned about STEM, and I looked at Dr. Washer and she was smiling and nodding. I just want to make sure that, and so you're not on camera, and so I just want to make sure that we don't forget the other school sites in our district as it relates to STEM and project-based learning. And with that, thank you for the time, Mr. Nava. I will stop.
Thank you, Mr. Herberly. I think Delta Sierra has one of those robotic, and I think we won't neglect that, especially it's very needed there.
I'll tell you that. Yeah.
I need one of those.
Mr. Nava, you mentioned Delta Sierra, and that is one of the examples that, wow, they're knocking it out of the park. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, let's go with the reports. 2020-2021 Learning Continuity Plan, Dr. Washer.
We did invite the employee group president to join the conversation, so all of our employee group leaders are on deck, ready to participate.
Mr. Nava, we can't hear Dr. Washer.
I second that. Still can't hear her.
Microphone was sticking up on, so you can't, it was covered.
Right again.
Can we start this over?
Still can't hear you.
Maybe Dr. Washer should enroll in Valley Robotics.
Now,
good idea. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Dr.
Porter.
Washer.
Anyway, thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board. I apologize for the delay. This is the shortened version of the LCAP based on the environment that we are in with the COVID-19 response. Dr. Sali and Dr. Seha will take you through the plan. We have our employee group leaders on deck, ready to participate as you deem appropriate, Mr. Nava. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Sali.
Thank you, Dr. Washer, Nava, members of the board. Can you hear me? Last week, we reviewed a short slideshow, and in lieu of spending time on that this week, to save time to actually go through the learning continuity and assessment plan, I will briefly review this again. The learning continuity assessment plan, also the LCAP acronym, is not the LCAP. It does not address the entirety of the district budget. It addresses what's known as the CARES funding, which is approximately $34 million based on 5 different funding streams. The CDE has provided an accelerated timeline for approval and an LCAP template, which we are utilizing. Stakeholder groups have provided input. We've worked with our ARE department to categorize and theme the work, the information collected from the groups, and that is included in our plan. We have also worked with other departments, the IT department, many conversations with budget, also in putting the plan together. At this time, we're asking for your review and input so we can include your additions and modifications to the draft, after which we will submit the plan as an action item in next week's board meeting. And if approved, it is then turned over to the San Joaquin County Office of Education for a second and a final review. The plan includes funding allocations in support of distance learning, including hardware and software technologies, additional and supplemental instructional resources, instructional time in support of continuity of instruction, supports of various student subgroups, learning loss mitigation efforts, social emotional supports, PPE, and school nutrition and meal distribution. I will turn it over to Dr. Seha, who has worked on the fine details of the plan with the county office in their initial review. He will provide an overview of the 41-page document and stop at related action times or action points, action items in which the expenditures are explained. Again, we are seeking input and a guidance tonight. And so you'll remember that while Dr. Seha reviews the plan. So if we can switch to the learning continuity plan, not the slideshow.
Actually, if we could first switch to the LCP September document, the 4th attachment.
Okay.
Right. President Nava, Dr. Washer, members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Next, we wanted to describe the stakeholder input and then review the main sections and actions of the learning continuity plan. First, we wanted to provide you with an overview of the stakeholder meetings. In a very short amount of time, we've been able to meet virtually with our district advisory council and our district English learner advisory council. In addition, we've met with three of our bargaining groups, including CSEA on August 11th, LPPA on August 14th, and LEA on August 17th. While the rest of the groups were invited to attend, they either did not respond or indicated they did not have input at that time. So on this document, pages 1 through 3 is also included in the learning continuity plan, and that's a summary of the outreach efforts for the stakeholder groups. And then if you go to page 4, please, that is where the input from each stakeholder group actually starts, and we've included all of the input that our various groups provided during all of the meetings. In addition, we also invited our community who was not able to participate in the virtual meetings an opportunity to provide written input via email. We did invite them to send snail mail letters, but we didn't receive any of those. But we did receive 20 email comments from our community, and those are included at the end of this attachment. So we did take stakeholder input into consideration when developing the plan. And if we can go ahead and transition to the actual plan, if you could please open up the third attachment, the 2020 Learning Continuity Plan. All right. And this is the actual document we're going to be submitting to the county office before September 30th, which is our deadline. I'm just going to go over real brief. This is actually the third attachment, the 2020 Learning Continuity Plan that I'm referring to. Michelle. All right, so on pages 1 through 5, we provided general information and a description of the stakeholder input. Then on pages 5 through 8, we reviewed in-person instructional offerings. And while we are currently in distance learning mode, our intent is to return to in-person instruction when conditions improve. We outlined the 4 possible levels in this section, levels 1 through 4. On page 8, we outline the actions related to in-person instruction. And if you scroll down to page 8, I'll briefly go over those actions. So action 1.1 is related to personal protective equipment, and we have allocated $2 million in purchasing personal protective equipment. Action 1.2 is the cost associated with all of our staff completing the Keenan trainings. Action 1.3 is the cost to extend instructional day. During distance learning, the CDE has provided a minimum instructional time that we have to offer to our students. We have actually extended the instructional day, and while the cost exceeds $14 million, we did include a $14 million cost in the learning continuity plan. All right, if you could go on to page 9. On page 9, we outline details regarding distance learning. This is the most extensive section because, this is a new learning mode for everybody. So we did have to provide substantial details related to distance learning. Page 15 was, if we can scroll all the way down to page 15, that's where we indicate what steps we're taking to provide access and connectivity to all of our students and families. Then on pages 16 through 19, we go over how we're going to monitor pupil participation and progress. And there are very detailed guidelines provided by the CDE where we have to have our staff, keep weekly logs of how students are participating in distance learning. Then on pages 19 through 21, we go over professional development related to distance learning. One of the biggest pieces of this was our Learn Together, Teach Together conference, which was offered before the start of the school year. Then on page 21, we go over any changes to staff roles and responsibilities related to distance learning. As we don't have students in person, there were some shifts that were necessary for some of our staff as we adjusted to the distance learning format. One of the examples is the cafeteria and playground supervisors. Since there aren't any students on campus, those employees don't have anyone to supervise, so we had to make some adjustments to their responsibilities. On pages 22 through 26, we provide detail regarding the supports for pupils with unique needs, and these groups include special education, students with 504 plans, English learners, homeless youth, foster youth, low-income students, and gifted and talented students. We wanted to make sure to include not only our traditionally underperforming groups, but also how we're going to accelerate learning for our gifted and talented students during the distance learning implementation. Then on page 26, we have our actions related to distance learning, and I'll briefly go over those if we can scroll down to page 26. So 2.1 is our professional development, planning, and collaboration. So this is $5 million altogether that we've allocated for this. And part of this was the week-long collaboration we provided for our teachers that we extended the start of school. That cost was $4 million for that action in and of itself. So we've allocated an additional $1 million for additional PD, planning, and collaboration. 2.2 is professional development specific to our English learners. We've allocated $500,000 there. 2.3 are after school interventions. We've allocated $2 million for after school interventions, and we've actually expanded our traditional after school interventions during distance learning. We know it's virtual, but we wanted to provide additional supports for our students that needed it. 2.4 are our technology resources we provided. Altogether, we're planning on providing $7 million, and this includes Wi-Fi hotspots, refresh Chromebooks, and other technology resources. And 2.5, we have found that various departments have been overwhelmed by the workload during distance learning, and so 2.5 is additional compensation for various departments, and we've allocated $1 million for that action. 2.6 are educational resources and school supplies. Our sites indicated that they needed additional school supplies to send home and additional school supplies, for example, for STEM, for students to be able to complete STEM activities while at home. So we have allocated $3.8 million for action 2.6. Then 2.7, additional software licenses. Teachers have reached out and indicated a variety of software tools that they would like to have access to during distance learning. Of course, those costs add up, and we've estimated the cost to be about 2.5 million for the 2021 school year. Then, all right, then on pages 27 through 31, we have strategies to address pupil learning loss and related actions. These actions actually don't have costs because we have included costs associated with these actions in the distance learning section. So 3.1 is our data management system. As you know, this software resource is Illuminate. And then 3.2 is software resources, planning and collaboration time to address pupil learning loss. And those actions were all included in the distance learning section. Then on pages 31 and 32, we went over mental health strategies. Page 32 through 34, we talk about how we're going to re-engage our families, how we're going to reach out to students who are not participating in distance learning. Then getting down to the wire, we have pages 34 through 38. We have strategies to provide healthy meals during all 4 levels of learning. So whether we're in person, whether we're in distance learning or hybrid, we have to indicate how we're going to provide healthy meals during all 4 of those levels. And then we do have one other action that's not related to the other sections, but it is related to mental health, and that's action 4.1, which is providing social emotional learning curriculum and additional resources for mental health. And we've allocated 300,000 for this action. And then the final section is increase or improve services. That's on pages 39 and 40. On this page, we have to indicate how we're going to provide additional support for our unduplicated student groups. And these groups include foster youth, English learners, and low-income students. And the numbers on the page, these actually refer to the 49 million that are part of our LCFF supplemental funds. This is the only section that refers to LCFF dollars. As Dr. Solly indicated earlier, the majority of these actions are going to come out of our CARES funding. All right, so I just wanted to provide a brief overview of our plan. And then as Dr. Solly had indicated before, we want to extend a big thank you to the following departments: child welfare and attendance, the gate office, food services, special education, budget, technology, assessment, research, and evaluation, our public information officer, and our curriculum and instruction staff, and our ed support staff were really key in developing this plan. They all provided information or sections. This was not a 2-man job. It was not just Dr. Solly and I working on this. This is truly a team effort. All right, and that concludes my presentation. We'll stop there for questions.
Neely, any questions?
Snow, did you call on me?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Dr. Solly, Dr. Seha, thank you so much for your presentation, for your work on this, and thank you to your entire team. I know that had to be a team effort. I've got just a couple of quick questions. If we can go to page 6 of your presentation. Okay, you look halfway down. You've got the paragraph there titled Systematic Approach to Measured Learning Status. First of all, are we going to have, or has the decision been made yet, are we going to have the SBAC test this year?
It was just announced by Secretary DeVos at the Department of Education this year that they would be implementing the state testing, or
Yeah,
seeking.
of course, they want everybody back in school full time too, but that's not going to happen either.
So, so possibly, it seems like it, but things can change.
Okay. All right. You know, I've been asking this for quite some time, and I'd like to know the correlation between the benchmarks and other tests that we do and how a student does on that SBAC test. It seems to me that our benchmarks as we go through the year ought to point to how students are going to do on that particular type of test. Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, that is correct. It is not necessarily what was taught, but it is what is covered in the grade level, as is what is experienced in April on the state exam. It's really the standards that are being measured, not necessarily the actual readings you took place in or actual activities you participated in. It's learning to apply what you've learned to a new question, a new assessment, which is the state testing.
Exactly.
So the benchmark should look similar to that.
I totally agree, because in order to be successful at taking a test, you have to understand the parameters of the test, how you take it, what are all the things that you got to learn, and how is it looked at on the test. So can we kind of look at that this year on how our benchmarks are matching up with the results on the test? I mean, we're not going to get an answer to this until next year when those tests, state tests, are finally released. But if we start now, before we have any benchmarks, before we have the state assessment, we might be able to see if our benchmarks are correctly assessing where our students are at. So could we possibly work on that?
Actually, there's some correlation work we can review. Yes, I do. There is a concern with any data taken this year because of the instance of whatever assessment might be taken online.
Yeah.
And the validity of that. So we have to take that with always with the back of our mind. Was the test essentially proctored or not? And there are tools. The Bloxy program we have just launched this year is a tool to assist in that, and that you can lock down the Chromebook so that they're only using the assessment on that Chromebook. However, there's no way to tell if there's another laptop next to that Chromebook. So
right. No, but at least it'll give us some practice on how to do this as well.
Correct.
So yeah, I'd really like to see that. Next thing is on page 24. Starts right at the top. English language or English learners. I'm concerned about how this is going, because it's tough for these kids, especially if English is not the primary language of the household. It's tough for them to learn English in this environment because they're away from where English is spoken all the time at the school. So we've got to look at how we're going to do this. One of the ways that I think might work on this is if we try to engage families in this as well. If parents who want to learn English could work with their kids who want to learn English, and then we have support via the computer, via Rosetta Stone or whatever we're going to use on this, I think it would be a great idea. So if we could do something with that to make sure that our English language learners are not left behind on this, and we've really got to push it forward. So I would appreciate that as well. Final thing I've got is page 31. You look down there toward the bottom, and it says mental health and social and emotional well-being. Give me a brief, your idea, and Dr. Washer, you can jump in on this. How are we accomplishing this?
I'll jump in shortly. I think initially, and it even came up in Dr. Khan's comments earlier tonight, the biggest component of this is making sure the connection with the student and the teacher is there. And I have observed on the classes I've dropped into online, the teachers are doing a heroic job actually of developing culture and relationship over a Zoom call. That is critical, and that is a process which will take a period of time, but it's amazing how fast it's occurring in our classes, how quickly the teachers are making that relationship. And as evidenced by the really impressive attendance that we are currently experiencing, and I expect will continue. So that's the biggest factor, but again, the teacher-child relationship is the biggest factor in any situation, but this is something we really have to pay attention to, because there's not physically being in the room with someone, it's harder to read, body language and other issues that you may see in class. But we're certainly aware of that and working to help develop that, and providing resources through our counselors and others listed here in this section of the plan to help address those. That is certainly a challenge at a distance, but we're well aware, and we will continue to work towards meeting the need, as well as for our staff as well. This is really a daunting process, and we have to ensure that our staff is also taking steps to make sure they continue to be well, so that they can be well for their students. And I'm not certain that answered your question, but I think it's really important to be stated that we are developing relationships with our students, which is the first step to making sure that there's a good awareness of what's happening with the child, and then working from there with the resources that we have in place in any year, as well as are currently on staff.
Okay, I totally agree with you that this is a difficult area, and we've already tasked our teachers with so much. One of the more things we need to task them with is we need to let them know that they've got support. Our LPPA people, our counselors, our school nurses, our psychologists, all of these people, I believe, need to be involved in this. They need to be looking for signs. From what I understand and what I've read from American Academy of Pediatrics, this is a tough time for kids. And we need to involve as many people as we can. Our LPPA people, our counselors, our school psychologists, they need to develop something for our teachers to look at. What should you be looking for in your kids? What might be a sign of a problem? That kind of thing. And we also need to get that to parents too, because we're continually hearing from parents about kids sitting there at the screen crying. So that doesn't work. And so we need to make this a big priority. I know that this is a plan. I know this is what we're putting in place, but we need to get busy on this. What I'd like to do is, within the next few meetings, I'd like to hear back as far as what we're doing about this. What is it that we're, what plans are we putting in place, actually working in order to help our children in this tough time that they've got? And with that, that's all I've got. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Porter?
I was going to follow up on page 31 where Mr. Neely left off. I was reading, I can't remember what journal it was, but they say right now 1 in 4 people are suffering from depression. And that is a shocking statistic. And I bet you it's even higher than that. Mr. Sully, do we have a place on our website where parents can look for signs of depression or anxiety, or is there a place to go where they can have access to these things from our website?
Yeah, on our website, there is a link across the top of all pages. It's I believe it's called Remote Learning, and on that link there is a parent page, and in the parent page, and actually on the teacher page as well, there are links to resources regarding wellness, student wellness, personal wellness. So we have, and actually we launched that way back in the spring, and we've added to it over the course of time, but there are some resources there for parents and as well as staff to access. Yes.
Now, let's say that I'm a teacher in a classroom and I notice that a child is off. What do I do? What is your mechanism for telling those teachers what to do?
Well, as with if any very serious piece, it would
Well,
certainly.
I mean, okay, walk me through the steps. I'm a teacher. Johnny is showing signs of anxiety or depression. What do I do?
Well, I would say first the teachers will need to ensure that they're engaging the student and addressing their levels of ability. It might be that they've reached frustration in the work and they are having difficulty with the work, and it might not be related to an emotional issue. It might be their frustration with the work. First of all, addressing that to see if it's related to the content of what you're providing.
Well, how does a teacher do that? Again, I'm looking at it linearly because we've asked a lot of our teachers. What do they do? You're just saying right now that maybe they have to look at it. It could be frustration with how they're doing in class. Are we told then to email the student, or do they talk to the parents, or what is the protocol that we've established for teachers to deal with kids that are having emotional issues?
Well,
on distance learning, I already know what we do when we're in class. I'm talking about with distance learning because it's a whole new playing field.
Right. So yes, the next steps would be reaching out to the parent and seeing, and actually we have in some instances more parent contact because of the distance learning. So in one regard, that at times is more helpful than the distance learning roadblocks that we sometimes run into. But yes, it'd be reaching out to the parent to see if there's some issue that the teacher could address to help the child, and sometimes making the parent aware that the struggling issue that the teacher sees that potentially the parent may not see. So I would agree that yes, first step would be reaching out to the parent and then seeing if that can some resources can be or activities resources can be made to adjust the known issue that the parent or the teacher can identify, and then bringing in outside other resources outside of the teacher's classroom, the individuals listed in that second paragraph there that are available to the teacher in form of a counselor or psychologist and community liaisons for that matter, as well as principal on the staff as well, making sure the principal is on board and aware when something gets seriously in a situation where is this leading to a student study session? Where is this going from here?
Okay.
Are there any other assessment resources that need to be provided by any of the specialists here so that we can provide some additional services? Is it a reading dyslexia issue? Is it sometimes the other thing we run into, it's harder to find a speech condition here because often the students aren't speaking that frequently. So we have to be aware of that as well. And so anyway, I'm getting a little long-winded, but those would be the initial steps.
Yeah, I was just hoping that the teachers had support and they knew where to go in terms of dealing with students. And if the parents don't get back to them, they have a next step and ready to go to support them in the classroom. So they're not doing everything, or they're not the counselor, they're not the behaviorist, they're not the mental health therapist. They have a hub of people that can take that over for them.
Yes, and I've talked to numbers of teachers and trying to help them because unfortunately, sometimes teachers, being nurturing as they are, they try to make it happen, but there are many other resources available. They need to focus in on doing their job and then bringing in the other specialists to help do their jobs.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Mr. Nava, if I could also add quickly that our counseling staff are working just as hard as any other group of folks during this distance learning time. They are very much aware that teachers need support and that students need support and that this is more difficult than in-person instruction. And they have been doing a lot to put resources together, to put things together for teachers and for students. And so I do need to extend a thank you to our counseling staff. They are working extremely hard to make sure that kids have what they need.
Thank you, Dr. Washer. Mr. Konaksak?
Well, I
you
just
there,
want
Gary?
to thank, I just want to thank all the work that's gone into this. I mean, it's amazing. So no, that was it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. Heberly?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Yeah, I was going to chime in at the last discussion. And what I wanted to make sure is a lot of times there's a difference between talking about what to how you advance a recognized problem with the child. And it does say, yeah, we're going to develop a plan. Well, we're already in it. So we need to have a plan, not develop one. And so I just want to make sure that, the teachers feel like there is somebody with them. And thank you, Dr. Washer, for that comment, with the counselors and so forth. Part of that is once that is referred out to the professional that is in charge of that area, is to communicate back with the teacher and say, hey, I have made contact. Just let me know how it's going, because the teacher's the one that's facing the child. And I don't want them to feel like, okay, well, I passed it off, so now what? And I just hope that communication is there. I would pretty much believe that it is, but it's just, I think, worth suggesting that communications is obviously two-way, and then the teacher would be a great resource for the counselor or psychologist or whoever to see, hey, how's it going? Is there any improvement? Is the child, getting worse or better, and that kind of thing. Also in that is that, and I kind of harp on it a lot too, is that distance learning is extremely difficult for the family structure also. And so if the child is exhibiting something, it may be from something else. It could be from the family dynamic and so forth. So I just want to offer that because there's an awful lot of information out there that says that this is not only difficult for children, but it's difficult for the families. So I just wanted to throw that 2 cents worth, and thank you.
Freitas?
Thank you, President Nava. I would just like to follow up with those who are hurting, and especially during these difficult times. This actually is Suicide Prevention Week. And I hope that we do make available resources for all those, be it being the distance learning or the isolation or even the smoke and the heat that's going on. Our students are facing a very, very tough time. And I appreciate Dr. Washer's extending the work of our counselors out there to do everything we can to help each and every one of us get through this, and all of our students to see that they get through healthy, especially if they're having these concerns. And I thank my colleagues for recognizing this and bringing this to my attention. President Nava, for the rest of my comments, so I would wait till we hear from our bargaining groups, our stakeholders, and the public comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Ms. McFarland?
Thank you, President Nava. I just want to make sure that in the mental health component that we are giving enough support to our administrators, because by the time a teacher on distant learning recognizes that there might be something going on, it could be a week, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks. And by the time they get to their administrator and their administrator passes it on, or there's that communication, valuable time is moving. And so I think by the time we get the resources out, I'm concerned that the amount of time that it's taking in there. And on a normal day, you can get to it quick because everybody's face to face. My concern is that we're not face to face. And so I think things maybe go on a little bit longer than they normally would if everybody was on campus. I don't have any examples of it. That's one of my concerns. And I think instead of us trying to, for lack of a better word, Monday morning quarterback this, I think we need to go to our counselors and say, what are you seeing? Is there anything else we can do? What else can we help those administrators and those teachers with? Because we all have multiple examples that we hear from different teachers. But bottom line is I'm not on a Zoom call. I'm not in an administrator's office, and I'm not in a counselor's office on site. So I would love to defer and maybe have a quick, at one of our next board meetings, have the counselors give us an update. I don't need any elaborate plan. I don't want them to go above and beyond. I want them focused on the students and their sites, but I would like to hear how it's going for them. And is there any resources that they might need that we could do a better job of giving them? because I think it's probably stepped up quite a bit with the isolation, and now you add the smoke and the fear. I mean, when you look at the news or you look anywhere, I mean, it looks like Armageddon outside today when I was driving to the meeting. And so your anxiety is people who have a baseline of a little bit raised anxiety anyway. I think this would take it to another level. Thank you. I appreciate again all the work that went into it. I can't imagine the hours for all the contributing.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nava, if I may
Thank you,
share
Ms.
for a
McFarland.
second.
You may, Dr. Sehi. Of course you may.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. I just wanted to share an exciting opportunity that we're offering 6 of our school sites. We are actually piloting 2 social emotional learning curriculum. They are called Paths and Caring School Communities. And through a process with Enrique Avalos, Paul Warren, and myself, we identified 2 evidence-based, empirically proven programs that we're implementing at the following sites: Creekside, Park Lane, Delta Sierra, Sutherland, Beckman, and Claremont. And during the distance learning efforts, we know that staff are overwhelmed, but we have offered additional sites to participate in the social emotional learning pilot. And we have actually had a few other site administrators that are interested in joining the pilot. And so we're going to be expanding those efforts. In addition, as Ms. McFarland mentioned, we do realize that sometimes there's warning signs, and we also have our Say Something phone number where any student who has concerns about their peers can call the Say Something phone number, and staff are on the line 24 hours a day, and they will contact the authorities or the school staff as appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Freitas. Yeah, Dr. Seha, God, again, I'm gonna just say it's great. Can we include more schools? It's just a piloting. Now, you know that pilot is going to work because we're in such a need of the mental aspect of students, the anxiety, the depression, all the things that happen in the home, the frustration with the computer itself, and it's a great idea if we could include not only elementary schools, but middle and high schools. And that would be a great thing to do. Again, I'd like to thank Dr. Sally and Dr. Seha for this program. I know it's at difficult times. If it was normal school, I mean, you would have your sessions and you talk about it, and we would have a local accountability plan ready to go in that aspects of having people in person. But this is difficult because you cannot talk to people actually personally, and there's no personal interaction there, so it's very difficult for that to happen. I've noticed again that it's very important that these youngsters, my gosh, and I'm repeating myself because it's such an important item, the frustration that they have. Mr. Freitas and I were at McNair. The principal, Mark Dawson, stayed the whole 3 hours with them, and we communicated with them. There's people that are coming in to get new Chromebooks. I mean, immediately gets on a walkie-talkie. Those people are directed to the Chromebook. Any other problems that are passed, he's got counselors. He calls the counselors, take care of this problem. He zooms in on the classrooms and is aware of some of the problems that the teachers are having in the mental health aspect. We spent some time over with Eric at Tokay. Same thing. He stayed there for 2.5 hours. We communicated, and he's doing exactly the same thing, except in a different way. He uses his vice principal there that he has very confidence that he delegates the authority to him for all the other counselors to do the job and get everything under control. But again, I want to thank you guys. Oh, hotspots. Yeah. I mean, we need a hotspot. Boom, right quick. They're there. So, I mean, I was impressed with the fact that the schools are not just, stagnant. They're moving. Everything is moving. And the only thing they wish is I wish we had the students here. But if we can't have them, we're going to do the best job that we can. And this district is amazing because I've researched other districts and they're somewhere down below somewhere. Some teachers are having Sacramento City's having trouble with the teachers on an agreement of something. But anyway, not going to talk about anything that's concerned. I want to also make sure that we include public comments. Michelle, do we have any public comments on this learning continuity plan?
Yes, we have two. First is Dean Blount.
Okay. Be unmuted.
Dean, please go ahead and unmute yourself muted right now.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Beautiful.
can, Dean. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. President Nava, Dr. Washer, and members of the board. I want to thank Mr. Neely for your shout out to LPPA. I'm Dean Blunt. I'm the school psychologist, and I am your president of LPPA. Many of you mentioned that we need social emotional learning, and that is built into this plan. And it's something that our counselors have requested, and I'm glad you're interested in. The district does have the school caring school community and PATS programs, which are in pilot right now. There are other programs as well, Second Step and Why Try. These are programs that are meant to catch students who are in emotional distress. And there's going to be a lot of stresses that we're going to see that are above and beyond what we'd normally see in a school year. There's some stresses that are from parents that have lost jobs, just stress in the home in general. Family members could be ill, possibly family loss from COVID, stigma from quarantine, from exposure or illness. And I can only imagine what it's going to be like if you're the student that is the case that takes your class into quarantine after we come back. There's going to be a lot of hangups there. So I think it's really important that we proactively go into a mode where we're addressing these issues and not waiting for reactions. I really appreciate the attention that you're giving to this. Our counselors are working like crazy right now and putting in a lot of extra hours, as are our school psychologists. The referral process, we still have our mental health clinicians that we can refer to. So we have a lot of resources, and we are happy to assemble and serve. I've heard of many situations where counselors have been called to step into crisis situations and have been able to help out. And I think that there's always room to improve, and places where we can tighten up the communication lines between parents and teachers and students and our counseling staff. So we're here, we're ready to serve. There's some other priorities on this program that I thought were very needy. I want to state that in my schools, I do have some students who have slipped through the cracks that we have not had logging on. And I think we need to follow those students up and find out where they're at and make sure that they are accessing our curriculum. These are students who are already struggling and are falling even further behind because we're not able to access them. So I'm glad that's in our plan. I think it would be really important to have a program like credit recovery when we come back, so that students who are having to leave for 2 weeks at a time for quarantine can come back to school and have an extra program where they can get the instruction that they need to catch up on the material that they lost while they were out. And for students who are choosing 100% distance learning, I think we need to really look at how we're going to provide that learning in relation to our normal classes. I really think that in-class learning is one skill set, and online learning is an entirely different set. And I don't think we can effectively use our teaching staff if we're splitting their skill set between both those tasks with their classrooms. I think we should consider a dedicated teaching staff to online learning for those students and do a bang up job at it, and maybe recoup some of those students who have gone to charter schools. And for students who are in person, they need the dedicated attention of their teachers. So those are the things that I found interesting and I think valuable, and I'm glad you're here to listen to us, and I really feel heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. I want to thank you, Dean, for you and your staff and addressing these issues, and I know you are, and you will take care of them. And I hope that you have some success in locating those students that are in deep trouble, that we sometimes discovered that they have other issues except for not being accountable. So thanks again. Another comment, Michelle?
Yes, Michelle Orgon.
Michelle, you're on.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you to Dr. Seha and Mr. Solly with the opportunity for the stakeholders to meet, although virtually. There is a lot that was captured at those meetings and put into this plan, which I'm sure has to be a very challenging task. The draft that you see before you has incorporated a lot of things that members have spoke up about. Going back, I guess, to page 31 on the social emotional, we are hearing that the intensity for writing the lessons, doing the lessons, connecting, trying to capture students that aren't tuning in and getting connected for whatever reason is consuming a great deal of time more than the school day. And that is an additional stress. And I do appreciate, the reaching out of, what both Mr. Heberly and Mrs. McFarland mentioned, those real concerns that teachers have about their students, the things that they're witnessing that are happening in the homes as they're teaching, creates an additional stress. I think there is something to be said about streamlining how, and I forget which board member mentioned it, by the time you get to your principal, to get it to the counselor, to make sure that resources are there, whether or not they're making CPS reports, all of those things. If there's a way to streamline that by site, by district wide, because every site's going to be just a little bit different. I think that is definitely an interest to Leah, because there are teachers, especially the ones that are new, that don't know who the counselors are by face. And so they're not sure, I'm sure, know who to look up on their site roster. So making sure that everybody know who's on first and second and who to call in those emergencies. I am curious on the 4.1, the providing curriculum, to Mr. Seha. Is that the cost of the pilot that is outlined? I'm sorry, Mr. Nava.
Mr. Nava, if I may.
Mr. Seha, answer, please.
Yes. So far we've spent about $150,000 on SEL curriculum. The additional funds would be to include additional sites, and we can increase this amount if the board indicates we need to increase it.
Okay, so I have heard an overwhelming need for SEL, and maybe because those sites haven't heard of the pilot or know what's going on. Would that be something they just reach out to their principals with the need to, Dr. Seha? I know you mentioned some tonight.
Yeah, with Mr. Palmquist and Mr. McGregor's permission, we can certainly make a presentation at an upcoming principals meeting to give more information to all admin who are interested.
Okay, thank you. I know since this draft is written, and I don't know if this answer, Mr. Seha could answer, but I know our lunch service, and we've changed to multiple days, which I heard is better for families. But I've heard that there is a change recently where students can go to any sites that may be closer to them than their own personal site to pick up their meals. So would we need to change that on this form?
Dr. Seha, you have an answer to that?
Yes, so that has been the case since the start of the year, but we can certainly provide additional information in this plan. You know, letting families know that whatever site they would like to go to, they can obtain their meals there.
Okay. The other that we've
Thank you.
heard from, thank you, Ms. Dr. Seha,
Yes.
that we've heard from
Yeah.
the community.
Michelle, can I interrupt? Mr. Khan would like to make a comment.
Did turn this part on. Michelle's correct. There's been a recent change in the funding for food services. The feds have finally waived the free or the summer program, so all kids eat for free regardless of whether they're a student. The only stipulation is that and they've got to be 18 or under 18 years of age. The issue that we face flopping back and forth with communication is the money's not guaranteed forever. This program will last as long as the money holds out, and then we go back to the free and reduced program. So I think the wording in here is fine, given that premise that there may not be who knows, a week from now, a month from now, we might be right back to this as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Continue, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, and maybe Mr. Khan can answer this. We've heard from some community members the questioning as to, I believe it's a food service form that they're getting from their site and wanting to understand why the school needs to know their salary. If that's the case, in order for us to receive that, maybe we could send out some kind of explanation to parents that are wondering, why are you asking for my salary now when certainly my child does not receive free or reduced lunch in the past. So if that helps our programs and helps everyone with more accessibility in the quickest time for receiving their lunches, just something that we noted this last week.
Mr. Khan, you have a comment for her.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. The either the free or reduced meal application or the alternative income form is unrelated to the waiver or continuation of the summer program. It's the ongoing effort made by nutrition staff and the site principals to get as many of these applications filled in so that we have an accurate count of our free and reduced meal percentages for our unduplicated account, which this is really more about our direct funding under the LCFF than anything else.
Thank you.
Mr. Khan.
I also I heard Dean talk about the plan in going back and the difference, especially I know at high school and secondary, we have some teachers that are designated to do distance learning and some other sessions are in person. We are still very concerned with a elementary teacher trying to do in-person learning and then turn around and do distance learning. As you know, during fourth quarter, the fatigue was definitely high. So we'd like to see, some designated teachers that are directly instructing distant learningly once we go back to in-person. And as we look at some of the guidance that's coming out on cohorts, it's concerning the numbers and how would a day look like for teachers in addressing the needs of all of the students on their caseload if they're working with a small cohort and you're not mixing those cohorts. So as we go forward, we hope that we're able maybe to distinguish a little bit about that. I think with the EL that was mentioned earlier, be interested to see when we can roll out Rosetta Stone, or if it has already been rolled out to some of our English learners at their home. I know it's a challenge to get some of the programs up and running, and that's one of those that is kind of self-paced that the teacher would modify to where they are. So we'd like to see that those licenses get started right away. Thank you again to Dr. Seha and Mr. Sully for all of the work in this plan. And we hope that there is more to the social emotional for all teachers to access or streamline for their students and families, and appreciate the comments that were shared earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll continue on with our agenda. This learning continuity plan will be on the agenda for action item on our next board meeting.
Mr. Nava, excuse the interruption. Just want to make sure there aren't any other employee group leaders.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had just 3.
Those are
Michelle?
the 2 that signed up online, but I do know that there are panelists online open. They haven't communicated to me via the website that they
I'm
would like to
wondering if
speak.
they didn't know that they had to do that because we said we would make them panelists. So would it be okay if we check to see if there were any other union leaders?
Mhm.
Would you check on that, Michelle, please? Let's give them the opportunity.
Well, because they are panelists, you may unmute if you
I
have
believe
something.
we might have Cindy Oliver,
Mhm.
Mary Diaz,
That's correct.
and Deborah Ladwick.
Yes.
Good evening. Deborah Ladwig has unmuted herself. Can you hear me?
Okay, Deborah, you're on. You're on, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, and Superintendent Washer. I did not sign up to speak because as a panelist, I thought I would be called on. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. I really just wanted to talk about the process. This was new this year. Everything about this year is new. And I just have to say that CSEA thoroughly appreciated the ability to be involved. Dr. Seha ran our meeting with great respect and has accurately reported all of our concerns. I will tell you that the number one concern from my unit is that our students are taken care of, whatever that looks like. If it looks like social emotional help, if it looks like food, if it looks like a hotspot, if it looks like a new Chromebook, whatever it looks like, we want our students to have everything that they need so that they can be successful. And I really feel like Dr. Seha during our meeting gave us the opportunity to fully relay our ideas, and then also our concern that we want to be part of the solution. We want to have ideas. We want to help put things into place so that we can have great program for our students. So thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you,
Mr.
Deborah.
President.
Mr. Freitas.
Can I just add something? You did point out that you and I were a couple of volunteers at McNair and Tokay during the lunch service last week. And we served about 400 meals that went out there. And I got to tell you, those meals were well prepared. They were fresh. None of it was processed. and the people were very, very excited, receptive. But more than that, the staffs at the food service staffs at McNair and Tokay were absolutely outstanding individuals that were very pleasant, very personal, very excited to be helping our families and our kids. Tokay even went so far, they realized that their snack bar was a little ways from the parking lot. And I hope no one gets disappointed because they don't get it, but they were providing golf cart service, picking people up at the curb, driving them to get their meals and driving it back. So if you don't get golf cart service, I guess you can send me an angry email and I'll see what I can do about it. But I got to tell you, those were 2 very hot days. It could have been very unpleasant, but it was actually a pleasure being out there and working with those individuals. And thank you, Deborah, and your team for everyone out there and the amazing food that we're providing, Dr. Washer, to our families. So.
Okay, we have two more panelists, Michelle.
Cindy Oliver, would you like to speak?
Cindy, you're on.
Or Eric Sandstrom, would you like to speak?
Oh, Michelle, that's the wrong thing to ask. President Nava, you guys can hear me? Yes, I'd love to give you a couple minutes, Mr. Nava, if that's okay.
Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer, do appreciate it. Eric Sandstrom here, putting on my hat as president for LUSDA. But we really appreciate the opportunities and everything that Mr. Seha and Mr. Saleh they've presented to you guys. One of the big things as a reminder from the administrative side anyway is a couple of things that were mentioned is our schools are open. As far as the offices and everything else and our resources, everybody that we need to have at the schools is at the schools to provide the services that we need to get out to our students as best we can under the conditions. Administrators are here, counselors are available. And again, all the schools are different and some people might be working from home or rotating in who's in the office, different things like that. But we have people at our school sites for parents' needs, students' needs every day. And again, whether that's our counselors, our administrators, our clerical staff, people getting hotspots, Chromebooks, additional school materials. And thank you to the Got Kids folks. I know Mr. Freitas, Mr. Nava here out here passing out, handing out school supply packets to students and parents as they came in to get their lunches and things. But I think that's critically important right now, not knowing how long we're doing our distance learning for and those kinds of things, is that the schools are here as a resource. And the things that that Dr. Seha and everyone are providing as well through the additional CARES funding and everything is extremely important. It's allowing us to enhance our services and offerings at the school as far as what we can do, but it's also materials and supplies. It's things we can get so students can take things home, additional things that can extend their learning, and whether that's STEM supplies, things for at the high school here anyway at Tokay, things like our floral craft programs and things, so that they have opportunities to do things at home that otherwise without those additional supplies and materials they might not be able to do. And I know that's happening throughout the district. And so I'm very appreciative of the additional funding that we see coming to the school sites for these kinds of things, both for our classroom materials, our office support, hours for our counselors. Same thing even with our school safety supplies, PPE and things like that. Our schools are open, and that is huge as far as us being able to continue to provide those services. When we need our counselors, they're either right here or a phone call away, and we get them on board with whatever might be happening. Again, same thing with our custodial staff, our cafeteria staff. So again, I just appreciate the support. I know our administrative group appreciates the support. And again, through this additional funding, we're able to continue and extend that every day. So thanks a lot. If you have questions for us on the administrative side, let me know, but we are here. The schools are open as far as that goes, and we're going to keep supporting our students and our families every single day through all the programs we have. So thank you for allowing us to do that.
Thank you, Eric. Any other panelists, Michelle?
Mary Diaz, if she would like to.
Mary Diaz, Mary, you're on.
Good evening, President Nava, members of the board, and Dr. Washer. I'm Mary Diaz, and I'm a budget analyst, and I represent the confidential group. And I wanted to say thank you for including us in this discussion and being part of the process. But at this time, I mean, we have no specific input. I think we are just supporting the kids and the administrators. So that's all I have. Sorry.
Thank you, Mary. Any other panelists, Michelle?
No further comments.
No further comments, and we'll continue on with our agenda. Thank you very much. Like I mentioned, this learning continuity plan will be on our agenda for an action item on our next board meeting. Dr. Washer, your updates on state and county response to COVID-19 in relation to schools and consideration for the Lodi Unified School District.
Thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board. I am aware of the time and that you've been sitting for a long time, so I won't belabor anything, but there are some important things here that I'd like to communicate with you. Just make sure that you understand where we are, where the county is, and what are some opportunities or options that you have for Lodi Unified School District. As you know, the governor has changed the criteria for moving through different phases of where we are with our intensity in the county with COVID-19 cases. We are in San Joaquin County, we are designated as purple, which is the most restrictive tier. So we are in the purple zone. That means that we are all on distance learning, and there are many other things in place for different industry sectors. We need to get to the red tier, which is the next level up. There are 4 levels. So the next level for us would be red. To move in the tier system, counties will need to be in their tier level for at least 21 days, and then we'll need to show the criteria for the next level for 2 consecutive weeks. And then we move into the next tier. So we are hoping to be able to move in the next tier. We do not know exactly when. Each Tuesday, the state website will show an update of where counties are on the criteria. There are 2 things that are looked at. One is an adjusted case rate. Thank you. You guys are keeping up with me. Thank you very much. An adjusted case rate needs to be, can't be, if you are at 7 or more new cases per 100,000 population per day, and that's an average. That's what keeps you in the purple. Right now, San Joaquin County is at 12.6. If you could go back to the other one that you had, that would be great, the chart. There you go. Right now we are at 12.6. And then there's the testing positivity rate. The next criteria need to, if you are at 8% or higher, you're in purple, which we are at 9.1% right now. So when we meet the red criteria in those 2 areas for 2 consecutive weeks, then we can be in the red tier. And that's when the county public health officer will give us permission and guidance on having in-person instruction. So we can move on. We can move on maybe fairly quickly through the slides. Keep going. Keep going. We did that. We talked about movement. Keep going. Here we go. Let's do this one. Even though we were in the purple tier, there is permission to have small cohorts, and this is new. And in fact, when I did my update video on Friday and gave the information about this, it changed a couple hours later. So things change rapidly, as you know. So there is new information about the cohorts. If we are to have some services for small groups of students, we can provide that service in a cohort of no more than 16 individuals, and that includes children and adults. Once the number goes past 16, it is no longer 1 cohort, it is 2 separate cohorts and has to have different adults. So the cohorts need to be together. They cannot intermingle with other cohorts, and it is the intent is for the high risk, at risk students. So students with disabilities, English learners, those who do not have access for distance learning, students who have some other need that puts them at risk. That is what a school district can use to determine priorities for this type of service. So it can be any combination of adults and students, but no more than 16 individuals total at one time. Also, there cannot be more than 25% of a school population on the campus at one time. That is the guidance for small cohorts. The purpose of this is to provide some services that are impossible or very difficult to provide in distance learning, to give an opportunity to have adult interaction with children on campus with their teachers. But again, it has to be no more than 16 individuals at a time. So I want you to know that that is something that is permitted now, even though we are in purple. So that is something that we will need some guidance on from the board in terms of your intent or opportunity for Lodi Unified for that. So if we can keep going. That's what I just said. There's also an option for a waiver for elementary schools. A waiver is for K-6 only. So it is not for middle school or high schools. We are not yet in the realm of opportunity for this waiver in San Joaquin County. We have not met the criteria for that, but it's something to think about because it does need to be submitted ahead of time. So just some food for thought at this point, if the board would be interested in a waiver for any elementary or combination of elementary schools, we would be submitting that to our county public health officer for her review and approval if we were to be in a position in the county where she would allow that. Right now, it is not allowed. They are not being approved, but something to think about. We would need to have a plan in place on how that would look, and there would need to be consultation with labor and parent organizations. So if we could continue. That just goes into some more details about the waiver. Next. So let's stop here. Just a reminder about our operational levels. Of course, we are on level 1. Level 2 is the hybrid that we had talked to you about in the spring and over the summer. The current board direction is as it is described here, where we would have 2 groups of students, one group A, one group B. Group A would be on campus Monday and Tuesday, and Group B on Thursday and Friday. Like I said, this is the current board direction. Of course, you are the ones who will decide how that ultimately looks if and when we get to that point. Level 3 and 4, all students on campus as permitted with different criteria and different guidance for each one. So right now we are on level 2. We do not have permission yet to be on level, we're on level 1. We do not yet have permission for level 2. That would come when we reach the red level. If we could move on. Next steps, just to continue to watch the guidance and the health orders. We do have direction that was given for meeting with individual students as appropriate. And then we would hope to hear some board direction or conversation about the 2 major elements that are out there right now, 1 being the small cohorts and 2 being the waiver for elementary schools. I think is that the last one? Last one. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Dr. Washer. So you need from this board these 2 items that you mentioned.
I don't necessarily need them right now. I wanted to share this with you publicly. Some food for thought. The one that is more time sensitive is the small cohorts, because that is permitted now. The waivers are not permitted now, but if that's something you want us to be working towards or thinking about, we would need to be working on that process at any time, so that when it is permitted, that we would be ready to submit, if that's something you want us to do. The small cohort is the one that is a little more time sensitive, because that is something that is allowed now.
You know, personally, Dr. Washer, I don't have any problems on giving the go ahead on the small cohorts and the waivers. I think that this board would be proactive, but I'll talk to Mr. Neely. You have any comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Yes, I do. I've been asking for something like this since this began. I have a concern about particularly our K-3 students. They are the least prepared to use distant learning. They need somebody there to help them with it. So maybe this cohort is something that we can do. Now, we can't have a teacher have two different groups because that just doesn't work. You can't be a member of two cohorts. You can only be a member of one. But we can get innovative about this. We can use like a substitute working with the teacher to conduct another one of the cohorts. And then you can split up and you can bring some of the kids in like that, or two substitutes, or however we want to do it. We need to come up with some innovative ways of using this opportunity to get some of our kids to come in where they can interact with somebody on the lessons. So, like I've said before, Dr. Washer, I look forward to hearing your solution on this. But I think we need to move forward on this part. I think we need to have started yesterday on this and just move as quickly as we can. And it's going to involve some negotiations. It's going to involve a lot of things. So maybe we could move kind of quickly on this instead of waiting around and scheduling negotiations, long time out and all that kind of thing. Let's make it happen. This is good for the kids. It's good for the kids to get them in front of an adult who can help them. So I totally support this. As far as the waiver for elementary, I do want to remind everybody that the state has not signed off on a waiver of liability for school districts. So it is a possibility that if we grant or if we apply for a waiver and are granted it, then we become liable legally, financially, and that could become very dangerous for us. And, you know, I know people say, oh, he's thinking about the money. Yes, we're thinking about the money. We have to think about the money. We're coming up with a really tough time here. And so we've got to be careful of that too. So that's something we need to look at. Everybody needs to be writing state legislators and the governor and saying that the school districts need to be held blameless on this as long as they're taking adequate procedures. So that's all I've got for right now. Thank you.
George, I want you to listen to Mr. Khan. He's got the money bags, so listen to him.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. I just wanted to piggyback on one of Member Neely's comments. Absent the waiver, the legislated waiver of liability that Mr. Neely mentioned, the district's memorandum of coverage under its property and liability plans does not cover any transmission of a virus or bacteria or anything of that nature. The district's general fund would be fully liable for it.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Porter, any comments?
I like the idea, us getting out ahead of this, but as with everything, we have to deal with the state, and many times state will change its mind. Liability issue is huge. I don't want to lose money because we were aggressive and maybe needlessly so. So right now, I'd like to be a little conservative, but if it's possible that the liability is covered, we have indemnity coverage from the state, and of course, we should be ready to go with this. So we'd like to see us to dip our toes in the water and discuss this with our labor unions to put it into place. But I wouldn't do anything until we are indemnified by the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Mr. Knapsack?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I like that we're being proactive with this with small cohorts. I'm kind of curious, Dr. Washer. Do you have a group of people that you think would be most important people to have a small cohort with? And in other words, where's our greatest need for this?
Mr. Nava, members of the board, in terms of a priority, it would appear that special education SDC classes would be in the most need. So that could be our priority. Just want to point out that the guidelines are a little different for preschool. They're a little more flexible in terms of the number of individuals and how teachers can operate within the cohorts. So the preschool special ed may offer a little bit more flexibility, but K-12, and this slide is outdated, K-12 is a total of 16 individuals. So if there were a class with more than 16 individuals, students and adults in it, there would need to be some sort of way to determine who gets the service of the small cohort and who does not, or we have, as Mr. Neely said, some other optional way to configure that, because we wouldn't want to go over that. We wouldn't be able to go over that 16 number for one cohort.
Well, okay. So I'll be anxious to hear your solutions when this comes up next week. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Knaxet. Ms. McFarland?
Thank you, President Nava. I too would like to see us move forward on this cautiously and once we're indemnified. And I'm not going to begin to tell you and Scott and Jeff how to roll this out, because I know you are far wiser than I on how to roll this out. I would say, is there any way for a pilot program? Can we do one school and kind of get our feet wet and see how it works? And maybe if you can identify the most need. I know there's many that have need, but there might be one where we dip our toe in the water and figure out what works. But again, I would never begin to think that I know better than you three. So I look forward to hear what you have to say. I would be in favor of moving forward on this. I'm just curious how it affects our teachers. Is this something that must be renegotiated? I see Mr. McKilligan nodding, or he's yawning, one of the two over there. He's nodding, yes, okay. So that probably is a factor in when we can move forward on this.
Thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board, Ms. McFarland. To answer a piece of your question, yes, it could be a pilot type of a situation or a phase in. It's totally up to the district on how that looks.
Thank you, Dr. Washer, Mr. McFarland. Mr. Heberly.
Thank you. I was taking notes. So it's pretty self-explanatory when it says we need to talk to employee groups, but it also says parent groups. Give me an example. Would that be PTSA? Would that be school site council? Who would that be?
Mr. Nava, Mr. Heberly, members of the board, yes to all of that. What I have heard that other districts are looking at a survey, a parent survey has been used or planning to be used, surveying all parents, surveying particular school sites, parents, but yes, certainly parent groups like the DAC, the DLAC, school site parent groups. That would be up to us to determine, but it seems like a broad range type of input, a thought exchange that we've used in the past, some sort of way to get parent input.
So just thinking kind of differently. So in our K3 classes, the ratio is 24-1. So is there a possibility that you could have multiple cohorts per school so that you can blend a couple of classes and separate them out so that you would have 12 plus a teacher? Granted, it would give us, we'd have to, pull in extra teachers. But I could just envision when a certain cohort is allowed, people are going to go, hey, whoa, wait a minute, why not me? And we should have to have an answer for that, because parents and families are ready to come back to school, because they know that that's the best thing to have one of our teachers in front of them. So what do you say about that? Can we have multiple cohorts per class, even if it's not the 24-1? I don't want you to go down a minefield here, but if we're going to do it for one cohort, how do you navigate
The
that?
answer is yes. You can have split the classes so that you have no more than 16 individuals together at once and they cannot cross cohorts. So if the class teacher was with one group, there would need to be a different teacher supervising adult with the rest of the children or combination of other classes. So yes, they can be split up into any manner as long as the cohorts stay together and don't cross cohorts. There is also the guideline of no more than 25% of the student population on campus at one time. So we would have to be careful about how many cohorts are on campus at the same time. The intent is for special types of services. So we would need to come up with some criteria for that. What was listed in the guidance were things like special ed services, English learners, homeless, foster, students who are at risk, which is a very broad category, students without internet access. Those are things that were specifically mentioned in the guidelines. So we would need to come up with our own criteria for that.
Well, I'd like to add that if we're talking about students at risk, so let's say our kindergartners, if they don't have instruction with a human being, they're at risk for not being able to read.
Agree.
And I'm not trying to circumvent anything. I'm just trying to say that when we say the most need, I think that's pretty dangerous for adults to sit there and pick one group of kids over another group of kids. I don't like that. So I'm just trying to think about how can we stay within the system, but use the system to our side. If they have the ability to do this, they must want kids to come back to school. And of course, when I read this, my first thought was, well, I think they're talking about, basically the special ed department of kids, which seems kind of odd because if you look at underlying health conditions, I would say as a percentage, yeah, you're nodding too, as a percentage, special ed kids may or may not have a higher health risk than others. And it's almost like, well, if it's okay for them, it's probably okay for maybe a healthier cohort. I'm just trying to work it so that we can maximize this as much as possible. Now, it doesn't have to be everybody all on this day. Phase it in, get one group, keep working on more, get more in the meantime. So it's just kind of a way, I guess, I'm trying to make it work the best I can for kids.
Yes, I know. I totally understand and appreciate that. Just one thing also to keep in mind is that if there is a teacher on site with a cohort, that it most likely will not be that teacher's entire class. And so they still have the responsibility of doing the distance learning for the other students. So we would have to juggle that as well. It doesn't eliminate the other students that are not on campus.
Well, that's a piece I was not aware of. So thank you for that. I do have a question later when this is wrapped up. So I'll pass. Thank you. No, just I have, well, you know what, let me ask now while I'm here. Dr. Washer, what I'm going to ask you to give us kind of when everybody's done with their comments is where do you see the district at the end of the first quarter? Because it's coming. October 2nd is our last day of school. Is that correct? Before the 2-week break? I believe that's what it is. So we said we're going to be a distance learning from, that date till at least the first quarter. And I know we have to rely on the county to give us that kind of clearance. And that's what I'm kind of getting at is where do you see the county going at the end of the first quarter? So if you want to answer it now or later. Yeah, yeah, Fauci. Yeah. Anyway, that's so you can answer now, think about it, answer later. It doesn't matter. I just kind of, because you're the one that talks to those folks. And I think you have a better read than we do.
Mr. Heavily, members of the board, I wish I had a crystal ball and could give you a clear-cut answer, but of course I can't. It appears to me that from our numbers and statistics at this point, I do not see us being in the red and able to get permission for in-person instruction, even on a hybrid, by October 2nd. The county would have to be in the red criteria for 2 consecutive weeks. If what has happened in the past with holidays happens as a result of the Labor Day holiday, there most likely would be a spike, which is what I'm hearing from public health officials, is they're anticipating a spike in the next week or so, week or 2 weeks, which would keep us in the purple. So although I'd like to be hopeful, to be realistic, I don't see that happening by October 2nd. That's just my opinion, not a health expert opinion.
And we all know it's not, and it was not a gotcha thing. It was just, you're closer to those decision makers than we are. And when I was reading these, I'm looking at the 2 weeks here, 21 days here. I'm going, there's no time. So that's why I asked the question.
I hope I'm wrong.
Well, don't we?
All right, thank you, Mr. Heberly. Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, President Nava. And I agree with my colleagues. I think it's very, very important that we get kids back in the classroom and as soon as possible. And while I think the ideas of small cohorts and waivers are fantastic, and it'd be amazing for us to work this in, I think the reality and the practicality of accomplishing this is maybe next to impossible. But as a court, as we well know, though, the hard things we do immediately and the impossible things take a little bit longer. So I look forward to figuring out what staff can do and will be doing for this. But and whatever policy we are talking about, obviously, is going to take into concern the safety and the protection of our children, of our staff, and that's not only to the minimum standards, but to the highest degree possible. And if we could go maybe one page up, I think to those at-risk groups, the previous page on the PowerPoint. Students with disabilities. I think this would be a fantastic opportunity. Small cohorts, we wouldn't have to go to the 16-to-1. English learners, as we know from our historically our statistics, about 1/3 of our population are English learners. So this is very important to our district. Access to internet and devices and distance learning. As Mr. Nava and I saw, I don't know if we have anyone now that doesn't have an access to an internet device or distance learning or a hotspot. And we probably, I don't know, Mr. Khan, Edith, we probably are down to about 1% of what we're doing there. Now, obviously, it is very hard to ask a kindergartner to read and learn to read on a device on there, but that would fall into it. But support for at-risk and high-need students, as Mr. Heberlew is pointing out, we have quite a high risk in our district, with at least 70% of our population being children of poverty and subject to those type of risks. So I do see the needs, but right now these are great ideas, but I'm a long ways from being able to support what we're going to do without hearing details. And unfortunately, the devil is in the details in both of these programs. But we can't wave a magic wand and have details come overnight. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and we look forward to more information on this in preparation for the ability to us to better serve our stakeholders. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Dr. Washer, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be allowed to have cohorts. Number one, you have to work on the logistics of this. Bargaining, the safety, all kinds of intangibles that are involved in it. Number two, I don't like a pilot, because you start a pilot at one school, you'll have 28 other schools that want a pilot. So we must include all these kids if we have enough to run some cohorts. But again, you have to work the logistics, because it has to do with the bargaining, and it has to do with the safety part of the teachers, the students, the parents involved. This is a new thing for us. We haven't started anything, but I think that with your staff and the people that you have working will be able to come out with you, will be able to come out with some logistics whereby we can offer this opportunity of cohorts to some of these needy students, like Mr. Freitas said, 70% are at the poverty level. Another high percentage are non-English speakers. Another high percentage are special needs, and all those. I think it's a wonderful idea to have that. As far as the waivers are concerned, let's do it legally. If you're going to do it legally, that we don't have any liability, I'm for that. But I think you got the consensus from the board, at least for the cohorts, and go from there. Now, Michelle, is there any public comment on?
Yes, we have three. First is Morgan Cedarholm.
Okay, Morgan, you're on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm a parent of a second grader at Beckman and a kindergartner at Reese, both in special day classes. I'm requesting you consider quick action for in-person cohort instruction for students in special day classes during the health pandemic. We have been following all public health guidelines and have remained physically healthy. We have really been thankful for everything the teachers are doing for our kids. But I fear the shift from the classroom with supports to a computer in the home environment has caused regression academically, behaviorally, and social emotionally, and placed an unreasonable burden on students with disabilities and their families. My second grader Josiah has nonverbal autism and ADHD and already struggles with language, social skills, and attending to the teacher. He struggles to follow directions without support and requires assistance throughout the meetings, of which our family has had as many as 9 Zoom meetings per day. He has forgotten nearly all of his math facts, repeatedly engages in echolalia and scripting, and when asked what day of the week it is during the morning meeting every day, he answers Thursday, even though he's in second grade. Josiah needs in-person interaction with staff and peers to develop his language and life skills. And actually, yes, he has been one of those children that has sat at the computer and cried. In-person instruction is not a non-essential social gathering for us. It is an essential part of our family support system And it's terrible to think that the past few years worth of work and IEP goals, both academic and behavioral, could be erased. I'm sure he's not the only one. Teachers and staff and therapists who've worked so hard to help students like mine succeed now have to attempt an entirely different method of instruction in a different environment without being able to use all of their professional tools and strategies. I haven't seen any data or evidence that shows that isolation and distance learning is effective or an appropriate method of intervention or support for young students with disabilities. To me, it seems like a very restrictive environment and an inappropriate method of public education for them. And whereas we should be providing these students with a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, according to IDEA. The teachers and staff are doing a great job, but the virtual environment just is not conducive for meeting these ideals. If the distance learning model continues, and the achievement gap will continue to grow exponentially, and students in these special day classes will regress and suffer. And regarding the question about treating these groups differently and other parents saying, well, what about me? I would just remind those parents that children like mine have already been treated differently for almost their entire lives, and they've already been handpicked by adults and secluded away in certain classes, and that because of we have IDEA, we have this goal of justice, and it's not about treating everyone the same, but about making accommodations for kids and giving them a fair opportunity. And there have been many, many times where I have had to ask myself, why not my child? Why doesn't my child get to play basketball? Why doesn't my child get to talk? So if someone wants to ask why my child gets to go to school and why their child doesn't, I could give them plenty of instances where I have had to ask, why not my child? So I appreciate some more sensitivity in that area. Please consider the evidence and what you know to be best for students like mine, and provide in-person instruction for students in special day classes during the COVID-19 pandemic. These classes are already small, cohort-sized, 7 or 8 students with 2 adults, and I trust that the teachers and staff will do their best to keep our kids healthy and safe. Thank you for your time and service to our community.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Jen Dietrich.
Michelle? Okay, you're on.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Jen Dietrich. I'm a parent in the district. You've heard me speak on this before, but I really want to thank the board for considering allowing small cohorts of students back on campus, and thinking about what these programs could do and which students they could serve. I really encourage you to reach out to some of the other school districts who have set these up already or are planning to do these. They call them learning hubs. You know, go to Natomas, Elk Grove, Oakland, San Francisco. They're all working on these, and also want to encourage you to think beyond just the school day instruction. So a lot of these districts have set up care almost 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they work with their community partners, you know, after school providers, childcare, other folks, to bring them on campus to say that you don't, you know, it's not just on you to build these learning hubs. There are other people in this community that can help support teachers and paraprofessionals. If we can bring small groups of students back on campus, they can, in addition to staffing, they can help, you know, some of the funding is flexible in order to pay for this. So I really encourage you to reach out, and I'm happy to share everything that I have. And I understand that, you know, liability is a huge issue and that the state did not act on this, but, you know, hopefully you may be able to learn some of the liability challenges and opportunities from other districts that have set this up as well, because they don't have the state liability coverage for this. And then regarding the student populations, in addition to students in special education, you know, thinking about the population of students that are experiencing homelessness right now and in foster youth, in addition to getting them the class and education that they deserve and need, giving them an equitable chance at learning. It's also about providing those additional supports that we talked about so much at the beginning of this hearing about the social and emotional support, the nutrition, and so much more. And thinking about which students to prioritize, the state, you know, with LCFF funding prioritizes these groups along with English learners and others that understand that to provide an equitable learning experience, there need to be additional supports. So I look forward to this conversation more, and thank you so much for looking into cohorts.
Thank you, Ms. Didrik. Michelle, anybody else?
Yes, last one, we have Michelle Orgon.
Michelle, you're on. Michelle, you're on.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board. While we got information and Dr. Washer is spot on with, you know, the state releases something and then a couple hours, you know, updates it. It is ever changing and hard to keep track of some of the changes. Leah would ask that we, as pointed out on one of the later slides, that we are still looking at continued focus on the health and safety supplies and how that ordering and incoming PPE is coming in as we look at possibly putting more people on campus and making sure that we have continued supplies. I remind teachers every day when they say, you know, I only got a pair of gloves, that they need to reach out to their administrator for more than one pair of gloves if they are wiping down their classrooms themselves with the Oxivir spray. We need to make sure that everything is being replenished in a timely manner. Part of the cohorts is there is a component of safety standards and cleaning that need to be met, and know that, you know, we would need to work out the details in how that's done. There's, as I listening to parents, there is nothing really more that a teacher wants than to be in front of their students. Distance learning, distance teaching, if you will, is not something that teachers have wanted and think that that is the best thing. Right now, that's the best thing to keep most people safe. So teachers do want to be with students, but want to make sure that it is done safely. We know that safety plans have started. I don't know that the safety plans on school sites have been finished. So before we talk about bringing cohorts and having that discussion, we definitely need the safety plans for school sites finished. And again, you know, some of the flexibility in where we were running some numbers, some of our school sites that have high second language learners, when we ran the numbers, you know, you're looking at 75 kids on a school campus of 300. That's so little. And exactly who would be teaching those cohorts and what would they be doing and what would they be missing from direct instruction from their teachers. So just some foods for thought as we move forward, what we need to make sure that we do and have to move forward, safety plans, enough PPE and safety supplies to be in person. And we are with you. It is, my teachers need that 2-week break already. They are burning the candle at both ends between power outages and complete shutdown of Google. They're switching up in the middle of the day to get instruction out to students. So please take caution in moving forward to make sure we have everything what's best for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Mr. Heberly, you have a question?
Yes, President Nava, members of the board, and Dr. Washer. I have a question. If you could
Yeah, I have another question for Dr. Washer. When you were talking about the waivers, that's where we were saying the state did not grant liability coverage for that. Is that correct?
Mr. Heavily, members of the board, there's no liability coverage at all, whether it's a waiver, cohort.
Okay, so if we do the cohort, we're still have the possibility of a claim going against the general fund.
Yes.
That's why I asked. I wanted to make sure. I was kind of hoping that the cohort would be covered, but the waiver's not covered.
No,
And you're
nothing
saying
covered.
no one is covered.
Correct.
Okay. That's, if we were to move forward anyway with the cohorts, how soon could that be instituted approximately? After an approval was given, hey, go ahead, how long would it be?
Mr. Heavily, members of the board, it would, it's hard to say. Our intent would be as soon as possible. It would depend on any conversation needed with groups and how quickly that could happen. We could do logistic end fairly quickly in terms of looking at numbers. It would be the other pieces that would have to come into play.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clarification. Appreciate it.
Mr. Heberly. Any other comments from the boards before we close? A motion, please.
Move to
The
dismiss.
following motion to adjourn. Second, please.
Second.
Oh, nobody wants to leave?
Second.
Second by
Everybody.
Mr. Freitas. I'll second. Mr. Eberly. Mr. Knaxak.
Aye.
Mr. Porter.
Aye.
Mr. Neely.
Aye.
And Mr. Nava, aye. Motion carries to adjourn 7-0. I will see you a week from today. Have a nice weekend for this next week and be safe. Dr. Washer, you're working on the logistics to get some involvement going, and be careful with the liability. Thank you. Good night. Good night, guys.